At 11:47 p.m., under the golden lights of Miami's most exclusive hotel, a young woman behind the reception desk looked up, and her entire world shifted. Maya Peterson had mastered the art of being invisible, blending into the marble and luxury that surrounded her every night. But when Alexander Kane walked through those glass doors, something ancient and undeniable sparked between them. He was a billionaire who had everything except what mattered. She was a woman who had nothing except her quiet dignity. What happened next would test everything they thought they knew about love, belonging, and the courage it takes to choose your own life. But the question that would change everything came later, whispered in a moment of pure vulnerability. "I don't know how to make love." And when he heard those words, something inside the untouchable CEO ignited in ways he never saw coming. If this story touches you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what keeps this channel alive and allows us to keep bringing stories that speak to the heart. The night air in Miami Beach carried the scent of salt and expensive perfume, mixing with the faint hum of luxury cars gliding past the Ocean View Grand Hotel. Inside, the lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers that cast geometric shadows across Italian marble floors. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and Maya Peterson stood behind the mahogany reception desk, her fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, her posture perfect but unassuming. She had learned over 5 years of night shifts how to be present without being seen, a skill that served her well in a place where guests paid thousands per night to feel like royalty. Maya was 23, though most people guessed younger. There was something untouched about her, not innocence exactly, but a quietness that suggested she had known loss early and learned to carry it privately. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her uniform pressed and immaculate. She wore minimal makeup, just enough to look professional, and her eyes, deep brown and expressive, held a kind of gentle attentiveness that made guests feel heard without her saying much at all. She had come to Miami from a small town in rural Texas 5 years ago, carrying one suitcase and a grief so large it felt like a second shadow. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 18, leaving her with her grandmother Diane, and a choice. Stay in the town where everyone knew her story, or start over somewhere no one did. She chose the latter. The Ocean View Grand had hired her within a week of her arrival, and she had been there ever since, working the overnight shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., existing in the strange liminal space between one day and the next. Most nights were predictable. Check-ins, check-outs, the occasional guest complaint, the steady rhythm of silence punctuated by elevator chimes and distant ocean waves. But tonight felt different. Maya couldn't explain why. Just a tightness in her chest, a heightened awareness of the air conditioning humming, the way the lobby lights seemed brighter than usual. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the glass doors slid open. He walked in alone, which was the first thing she noticed. Men who looked like him, tailored charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes, the kind of watch that cost more than her annual salary, usually traveled with assistants, security, entourages. But Alexander Kane entered the Ocean View Grand by himself, carrying a single black leather bag and an air of controlled exhaustion that Maya recognized immediately. She had seen it in her own reflection often enough, the look of someone who was tired not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of being constantly present for everyone else. He was 28, though the sharpness in his eyes suggested someone who had lived several lifetimes already. Tall, with dark hair slightly disheveled from travel, a jawline that spoke of both privilege and discipline. His eyes were grey-blue, the color of a storm brewing over the ocean, and when they landed on Maya, something happened that neither of them expected. The air shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no sparks, no movie soundtrack, but Maya felt it in her chest, a sudden intake of breath she couldn't control, a warmth spreading through her ribs, like she'd swallowed sunlight. Alexander stopped mid-step, just for a fraction of a second, his expression flickering from professional distance to something unguarded and raw. Recognition, though they had never met. Connection, though it made no logical sense. "Good evening," Maya said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Welcome to the Ocean View Grand. Do you have a reservation?" Alexander blinked, as if remembering where he was. "Yes, Alexander Kane, Presidential Suite." His voice was deep, textured, the kind of voice that commanded boardrooms and made subordinates nervous. But when he spoke to her, there was something softer underneath. Curiosity, maybe, or surprise at his own reaction. Maya's fingers moved over the keyboard, pulling up his reservation. Presidential Suite for 2 weeks. Business stay, VIP status. She had checked in hundreds of wealthy guests before, knew the protocol by heart. But her hands were trembling slightly, and she prayed he didn't notice. "Mr. Kane," she said, looking up and meeting his eyes again. Mistake. The connection sparked again, stronger this time, and she saw him feel it too, the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his gaze held hers a beat too long. "Everything is ready for you. You're in Suite 2401. May I see your ID and credit card, please?" He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed her a black American Express card and a driver's license. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, brief, accidental, and Maya felt electricity shoot up her arm. She pulled back quickly, cheeks warming, and focused intently on the computer screen as if it held the secrets of the universe. Alexander didn't move. He stood there watching her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the slight furrow of her brow as she concentrated, the rise and fall of her breathing. "Have you worked here long?" he asked, and the question surprised her. Guests rarely made conversation with night staff, especially not guests like him. Maya glanced up, cautious. 5 years. "You like it?" She considered lying, giving the polite answer she'd perfected over time. But something about the way he was looking at her, genuinely interested, not just making small talk, made her tell the truth. "It's quiet," she said. "I like the quiet." Alexander nodded slowly, as if she'd revealed something profound. "I understand that." The printer whirred, spitting out registration forms. Maya placed them on the counter, along with a pen. "If you could just sign here and initial here, please." He signed without looking at the paper, his eyes still on her. "What's your name?" "Maya." She hesitated. "Maya Peterson." "Maya," he repeated, and the way he said it, slowly, deliberately, like he was memorizing it, made her heart stutter. "That's a beautiful name." "Thank you," she managed, feeling the blush deepen. She finished the check-in process with practiced efficiency, programming his key card, preparing the welcome packet. "You're all set, Mr. Kane. The elevator to your floor is just past the lounge. Is there anything else I can help you with tonight?" He took the key card from her, and again their fingers touched. This time, neither of them pulled away immediately. The moment stretched, suspended in the quiet lobby with its distant ocean sounds and soft piano music playing through hidden speakers. "No," Alexander said finally, his voice lower now, almost intimate. "Thank you, Maya." He picked up his bag and turned toward the elevators, then paused, looked back at her. "Do you work every night?" Maya's throat went dry. "Monday through Friday, 11 to 7. He nodded once, something like satisfaction crossing his features. "Good to know." And then he was gone, disappearing into the elevator, leaving Maya standing behind the desk with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She pressed her palms flat against the cool marble counter, trying to ground herself, trying to understand what had just happened. In 5 years, she had checked in countless guests, movie stars, athletes, politicians, CEOs. She had learned to see them without really seeing them, to be professional and invisible in equal measure. But Alexander Kane had looked at her, truly looked at her, and in those few minutes she had felt seen in a way that terrified and thrilled her at the same time. The lobby returned to its usual quiet. Maya tried to focus on her work, updating the system, preparing for the next arrival. But her mind kept drifting back to storm-colored eyes and a voice that said her name like it mattered. She didn't know it yet, but her life had just split into before and after, before Alexander Kane walked through those doors, and everything that would come after. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Outside, Miami sparkled with life and possibility. And 24 floors above, in a suite overlooking the ocean, a man who had everything stood at the window and wondered why a woman with nothing had just made him feel more alive than he had in years. The following evening, Maya arrived at work with a knot in her stomach she couldn't explain. She told herself it was nothing, just a guest, just another face in the endless rotation of wealthy strangers who passed through the Ocean View Grand. But as she settled behind the reception desk, smoothing her uniform and logging into the system, she caught herself glancing toward the elevators more than usual, her pulse quickening at every soft chime announcing someone's arrival. At 11:52 p.m., he appeared. Alexander Kane emerged from the elevator wearing dark jeans and a simple grey t-shirt that somehow looked more expensive than most people's entire wardrobes. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd just showered, and he carried himself with that same controlled exhaustion she'd noticed the night before. But tonight, there was something else, a barely concealed purpose in his stride as he walked directly toward the reception desk, toward her. "Good evening, Maya," he said, and the fact that he remembered her name, used it so naturally, made her hands still on the keyboard. "Mr. Kane." She looked up, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the way her heart was hammering. "Is everything all right with your suite?" "The suite is perfect." He leaned slightly against the counter, casual in a way that felt deliberate, studied. "I was wondering if you could recommend a good restaurant, something authentic, not the usual tourist places." Maya blinked. The hotel had an entire concierge service specifically for this purpose, available 24 hours a day. He knew that. She knew that he knew that. And yet here he was, asking her. "What kind of food do you like?" she asked, playing along, curious where this was going. "Surprise me." His eyes held hers, and there was a challenge in them, but also something softer, genuine interest. What would Maya Peterson recommend? She felt her defenses shift, just slightly. "There's a small Cuban place in Little Havana, Café Martinez. It's not fancy, but the ropa vieja is incredible, and the owner's grandmother makes flan that will ruin every other dessert for you." Alexander smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. The CEO disappeared, replaced by someone younger, more open. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." He didn't move. Maya waited, unsure what came next, feeling the weight of the silence between them like something physical and alive. "Well," she said finally, "I hope you enjoy it." "I will." He pushed off from the counter, took 3 steps toward the elevator, then turned back. "Do you drink coffee, Maya?" The question caught her off guard. Yes? How do you take it?" "Black, 2 sugars." He nodded, as if she just shared classified information, and then he was gone again, leaving her staring after him with a mixture of confusion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. The pattern continued for days. Alexander found reasons, endless creative reasons, to appear at the reception desk during her shift. He needed directions to South Beach. He wanted to know the best time to visit the Windward Walls. He had questions about the hotel's gym hours, even though that information was in the welcome package she'd given him. Each time, he stayed a little longer. Each conversation peeled back another layer. On the 4th night, he appeared at 3 a.m., when the lobby was completely deserted, and Maya was halfway through her shift, fighting off the drowsiness that always crept in during the dead hours. He was wearing running clothes, his t-shirt dark with sweat, and he carried 2 coffee cups from the hotel's cafe. "I remembered," he said simply, placing 1 cup in front of her. "Black, 2 sugars." Maya stared at the coffee, then at him, and felt something crack open in her chest. It was such a small gesture, just coffee, but no one had remembered how she took her coffee in years. No one paid that kind of attention to details about her life. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." Alexander took a sip of his own coffee, black, no sugar, she noted, and leaned against the counter in what was becoming his usual spot. "Couldn't sleep." "I'm working," she pointed out, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Right, but you look tired. It's 3 in the morning. Everyone looks tired at 3 in the morning. Not you." His voice was quiet, serious. "You look like you belong to this hour, like it's when you're most yourself." Maya's breath caught. It was too perceptive, too accurate, and she didn't know what to do with that kind of observation. "You're wrong," she said, but without conviction. "I'm just awake because I have to be." "I don't think so." Alexander set his coffee down, and there was an intensity in his gaze now that made her pulse race. "I think you chose the night shift on purpose. I think you like existing in the margins, where no one really sees you. It's safer that way." The words hit too close to home. Maya felt exposed, vulnerable, and her instinct was to deflect, to rebuild the walls he was somehow dismantling without permission. "You don't know me, Mr. Kane." "Alexander," he corrected gently. "And you're right. I don't. But I'd like to." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn paperback book. "I thought you might like this," he said, placing it on the counter between them. Maya looked down. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The cover was creased, the pages softened from multiple readings, and when she opened it carefully, she saw notes in the margins. His handwriting, she realized, small and precise. Observations and reactions scattered throughout the text. "This is your copy," she said, stunned. "You've read this?" "Many times. It's my favorite." Alexander's expression was unguarded now, almost shy. "You mentioned last week that you'd always wanted to read it, but never got around to it. I don't know. I thought maybe you'd accept it if it came from me." Maya ran her fingers over the annotations, reading fragments of his thoughts. "This passage wrecked me. Solitude as choice versus curse. The weight of family legacy." She felt like she was holding something intimate, something precious, a window directly into his mind. "I can't take this," she said, even though everything in her wanted to. "It's yours. It means something to you." "Exactly." Alexander's voice was soft but firm. "That's why I want you to have it." Their eyes met, and Maya saw the truth there. This wasn't just about a book. This was him offering her a piece of himself, testing whether she'd accept it, whether there was something real growing between them, or just her imagination running wild during long night shifts. She made a decision, one that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. I'll take care of it." "I know you will." He smiled, and there was relief in it, and something else. Satisfaction, maybe, or the beginning of something neither of them had named yet. After that night, the dynamic shifted. Alexander still found excuses to come downstairs, but now they talked about real things. Books, music, the strange beauty of Miami at dawn when the city was caught between darkness and light. He told her about growing up in Manhattan, the pressure of legacy and expectations. She told him about Texas, about fields of bluebonnets and summer nights so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. They developed rituals. Every day at 3 p.m., 15 hours into her shifts opposite, when Alexander was finishing afternoon meetings, he'd appear with coffee for her, prepared exactly how she liked it. She started leaving him notes at the front desk when interesting guests checked in, small observations that made him laugh. Once she sketched a quick drawing of the hotel cat that wandered through the lobby. She'd always been good at drawing, a skill from childhood she'd nearly forgotten, and left it in an envelope with his name on it. He kept it. She knew because she saw it later, tucked into his wallet when he paid for something, the edges already softened from handling. The tension between them grew with each interaction, not uncomfortable, but charged, electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Accidental touches became frequent, lingering. When he handed her the coffee, their fingers would brush, and neither would pull away immediately. When she reached across the desk to point something out on a map, he'd lean in, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle, expensive, with notes of cedar and ocean. The other hotel staff noticed. Maya heard the whispers, saw the curious glances when Alexander appeared nightly at her desk. But she told herself it didn't matter. This thing between them, whatever it was, existed in its own space, separate from judgment or logic. One night, 2 weeks after their first meeting, Alexander appeared at midnight with something new in his expression, determination mixed with vulnerability that made Maya's stomach flutter. "I have a question," he said. And his voice was different now, more serious. "And I need you to be honest with me." Maya's hands stilled on the keyboard. "Okay. Do you feel this?" He gestured between them, and there was no pretense now, no game. "This thing that happens every time we're near each other? Or am I completely delusional and you're just being professionally polite to an annoying guest who won't leave you alone?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and risk. Maya could deny it, could retreat into safety and professionalism, could protect herself from whatever chaos might follow if she admitted the truth. But she was tired of being invisible, tired of choosing safe over real. "I feel it," she whispered, and watched something ignite in his eyes. Hope, relief, hunger, all at once. Every single time. Alexander exhaled slowly, and his smile was devastating in its honesty. "Good," he said, "because I was starting to think I was losing my mind." "You might be," Maya said, but she was smiling now too, feeling reckless and terrified, and more alive than she'd felt in 5 years. "I might be too. Then let's be crazy together." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something intimate and urgent. "Have dinner with me, Maya. Not here, not in the hotel. Somewhere real, where I'm just Alexander and you're just Maya, and we can figure out what this is without marble and chandeliers watching us." Every logical part of her brain screamed no, guests and staff, the rules, the impossibility of someone like him truly seeing someone like her. But her heart, that traitorous, hopeful thing, was already saying yes. "When?" she heard herself ask. "Tomorrow. Your night off. Unless—" He caught himself, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you don't want to. I don't want to pressure you. If this is just... if I'm reading this wrong, you're not reading it wrong." Maya's voice was steadier now. "Sure. Tomorrow. Yes." The smile that broke across Alexander's face was like sunrise. Gradual, inevitable, transforming everything it touched. "Tomorrow," he repeated, and it sounded like a promise. Maya changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple navy blue dress that hit just above her knees. Elegant, but not trying too hard, she hoped. She stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, hands trembling slightly as she fastened a delicate silver necklace her grandmother had given her years ago. The face, looking back at her, was flushed with nerves and something else. Anticipation, maybe, or the terrifying possibility of hope. What was she doing? Alexander Kane was a billionaire, a CEO who commanded boardrooms and influenced markets. She was a night receptionist who lived paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment with water-stained ceilings. This couldn't work. This made no sense, but then she remembered the way he looked at her, really looked at her, like she was someone worth seeing. And she remembered his annotations in the margins of that book, the vulnerability in his voice when he'd asked if she felt it too. Her phone buzzed. "I'm downstairs. No rush. Take your time." Maya took one last breath, grabbed her small purse, and headed down. Alexander was leaning against a sleek black car, and when he saw her emerge from the building, his expression shifted into something that made her forget how to breathe properly. He was wearing dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he looked at her like she'd just solved every equation that had ever puzzled him. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He smiled, opened the car door for her. "I made reservations at the hotel restaurant. I hope that's okay. I wanted somewhere where we could actually talk, and I know the chef. He'll make sure we have privacy." Maya slid into the car, the leather seats cool against her skin, and tried not to think about how this vehicle probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. Alexander got in beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, and suddenly the space felt intimate, charged with everything unsaid between them. The hotel restaurant was called Azure, and it occupied the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Miami coastline. The maitre d' greeted Alexander by name and led them to a corner table, perfectly positioned with a view of the ocean turning silver under the moonlight. Soft piano music drifted through the space, and the lighting was low, intimate, making everything feel like they existed in their own private world. Alexander pulled out her chair, and Maya sat, hyper-aware of every detail, the weight of the linen napkin, the crystal water glasses catching candlelight, the way her heart wouldn't stop racing. "I'm nervous," Alexander said suddenly, and the admission surprised her so much that she laughed, a real spontaneous sound that seemed to ease something in both of them. "You're nervous?" Maya shook her head in disbelief. "You run a billion-dollar company. You negotiate with world leaders. What could possibly make you nervous about dinner?" "You." He said it without hesitation, his grey-blue eyes steady on hers. "Because this matters. You matter, and I haven't felt that way about anything in a very long time." Maya's throat tightened. "I'm nobody, Alexander, just a girl who checks people in and out of hotel rooms." "Stop!" His voice was firm but gentle. "Don't do that. Don't minimize yourself because the world has taught you that's safer. You're not nobody, Maya, not to me." The waiter appeared, breaking the intensity of the moment, and they ordered, Maya choosing the grilled sea bass because it was the least expensive entree, Alexander ordering the same without looking at the menu, his attention never leaving her face. When they were alone again, he leaned forward. "Tell me about Texas, about growing up there." Maya hesitated, then decided if this was going to mean anything, it had to start with truth. "I grew up in a town so small, everyone knew everyone's business. My parents owned a general store, nothing fancy, just steady, reliable. They were good people, simple lives, but full ones." Her voice caught slightly. "They died when I was 18, car accident on a rainy night coming back from visiting my aunt. One moment they were there, and the next." Alexander's hand moved across the table, covering hers. The contact was warm, grounding. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Maya looked down at their joined hands. "My grandmother raised me after that, Diane. She's this force of nature, tough as nails but with the biggest heart. She told me I could stay in that town and let grief swallow me whole, or I could go live, really live. So I left, packed one suitcase, got on a bus and ended up here." She looked up at him. 5 years later, I'm still trying to figure out what living actually means." "I think you're doing better than you realize," Alexander said quietly. "It takes courage to start over, to choose uncertainty over comfort." "What about you?" Maya asked, turning the focus back to him. "What's your story? And don't give me the polished CEO biography. Give me the real one." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing absent patterns on the back of her hand. My father built Kane Investments from nothing. He was brilliant, driven, and completely absent. I grew up in penthouses and boarding schools, surrounded by every material thing a kid could want, and starving for the one thing money couldn't buy: time, attention, love, maybe, though I'm not sure he knew how to give that. He paused, something painful flickering across his features. He died when I was 22. Heart attack at his desk. Left me everything: the company, the fortune, the legacy. And suddenly I was supposed to be him. Step into his shoes, carry on his vision, prove I was worthy of the Kane name. That's a lot of weight for a 22-year-old, Maya said softly. It is. It was. Alexander's eyes met hers, and she saw exhaustion there. Not physical, but soul deep. I spent the last 6 years building the company bigger, stronger, more successful. I worked 18-hour days, made deals that would make my father proud, accumulated wealth I'll never be able to spend. And through it all, I was surrounded by people, business partners, board members, women who wanted to be with the CEO of Kane Investments. He squeezed her hand gently. But I was completely alone. Until I walked into a hotel lobby at midnight and saw a woman behind a desk who looked at me like I was just a person, not a bank account, not a business opportunity, just me. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. I did see you. I do see you. I know. His voice was rough with emotion. That's why I kept coming back. Why I couldn't stay away, even though every logical part of my brain told me this was complicated and messy and didn't fit into my carefully controlled life. Because for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. Their food arrived, and they ate slowly, the conversation flowing easier now that the dam had broken. They talked about books. Maya confessed she was already halfway through 100 Years of Solitude and couldn't stop thinking about the Buendia family's curse of solitude. Alexander admitted he saw himself in their isolation, the way success and ambition could build walls as surely as any physical barrier. They talked about music. Maya loved old country songs that reminded her of home, while Alexander confessed to a secret addiction to jazz, the kind of complex, improvised music that required you to really listen. They talked about dreams, Maya's quiet wish to maybe go back to school someday, study literature or art, things that fed the soul rather than just paying bills. Alexander's admission that he sometimes fantasized about walking away from it all, living somewhere simple where no one knew his name. What would you do, Maya asked, genuinely curious, if you could do anything? Be anyone? Alexander was quiet, considering. I think I'd teach. Maybe business or economics at a university. Work with young people who still have fire in their eyes, who haven't been beaten down by corporate politics and greed. Help them build something meaningful instead of just profitable. He smiled, self-deprecating. Though that probably sounds ridiculous coming from someone who spent 6 years doing exactly the opposite. It doesn't sound ridiculous, Maya said firmly. It sounds human and brave. What about you? Alexander turned the question back. If you could do anything. Maya looked out at the ocean, the moonlight painting silver paths across dark water. I think I'd write. Stories, maybe. Or teach kids, show them that books can be magic, that reading can take you anywhere, even if you're stuck in one place. I'd want to do something that, I don't know, that helps people feel less alone, because I know what that loneliness feels like, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Then why don't you? Alexander asked gently. What's stopping you? Fear, mostly. Maya's laugh was soft, rueful. Fear that I'm not good enough, not smart enough, that people like me don't get to have dreams like that wanting more is somehow ungrateful when I should just be happy I have a steady job and a roof over my head. Alexander leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. Can I tell you something? You just described every person I know in the corporate world. Fear of not being enough, fear of wanting more. The only difference is they hide it behind suits and swagger, but it's the same fear." His voice softened. "Life is now, Maya. Not someday when you're ready, not after you've earned permission from some invisible authority. Now, today, this moment. And if you spend your whole life waiting to be enough, you'll miss the fact that you already are." The words hit her like a physical force, reverberating through her chest, settling into the scared places she'd been protecting for years. "How do you do that?" she whispered. "How do you say exactly what I need to hear?" "Because I see you," Alexander said simply. "Really see you, and what I see is someone extraordinary, pretending to be ordinary because it's safer. But Maya..." He waited until she met his eyes. "Safe is overrated, and you deserve so much more than safe." Dessert arrived. Chocolate souffle that neither of them had ordered, but that appeared courtesy of the chef. They shared it, trading bites across the table, the intimacy of the gesture not lost on either of them. The conversation drifted to lighter things, funny hotel stories, disastrous cooking attempts, childhood memories that made them both laugh until tears ran down their cheeks. It was past midnight when they finally left the restaurant, the Miami night warm and alive around them. Alexander walked Maya to his car, but neither of them moved to get in. They stood there in the parking lot, the space between them charged with possibility and uncertainty. "I should get you home," Alexander said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Probably," Maya agreed, but she didn't move either. Maya. Her name on his lips was a question, a plea, a promise. "This, tonight, this was the most real I've felt in years, the most myself, and I don't want it to end." "Neither do I," she admitted, and the vulnerability in her own voice surprised her. Alexander stepped closer, and Maya's breath caught. He raised one hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and cupped her cheek with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she leaned into the touch without thinking. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya's heart was a wild thing in her chest. "Yes." He lowered his head slowly, deliberately, and when his lips met hers it was soft at first, testing, asking, waiting for permission. Maya's hands found his shirt, fisting in the fabric, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened. It wasn't desperate or hungry yet. It was reverent, careful, like they were both handling something precious and breakable. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something," Maya said, her voice shaky. "And I need you to be honest about whether it changes things." "Okay." Alexander's hands settled on her waist, steady and warm. She took a breath, forced herself to continue. "I've never been with anyone before, like that, and I need you to know that, before this goes any further, because if that's weird or complicated or not what you want..." "Maya." Alexander pulled back just enough to look at her, and his eyes were so full of tenderness it almost hurt. "That doesn't change anything. It doesn't make you less. It doesn't make this less. If anything..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If anything, it makes me more certain that I need to be careful with you. That I need to be worthy of whatever you choose to give me. There's no pressure, no expectation. We move at whatever pace feels right for you." Tears spilled over, and Maya laughed through them. "Why are you so perfect?" "I'm not." Alexander wiped her tears with his thumbs, smiling. "I'm really not. I'm workaholic and controlling and terrible at expressing emotions, but with you, I want to try. I want to be the man you see when you look at me." Maya kissed him again, and this time it was her initiating, her choosing, her claiming. And when they finally got into the car and Alexander drove her home, their hands stayed linked across the console, neither willing to break the connection. At her building, he walked her to the door. One more kiss, this one sweet, lingering, full of promises neither of them had voiced yet. "I'll see you tomorrow?" Alexander asked, and there was hope in it, and vulnerability, like he still couldn't quite believe she'd choose him. "Tomorrow," Maya confirmed, "and the day after that, and the day after that." His smile was sunrise breaking over ocean water. Good. She watched him drive away, standing there long after the taillights disappeared, her fingers pressed to her still tingling lips, her heart full of something that felt dangerously close to falling. Inside her apartment, she picked up the worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude and opened to a page marked with his handwriting. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot yet accept. Maya smiled, closed the book, and knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to change. The next 3 days passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Alexander found reasons to linger at the hotel even when business didn't require it. Maya felt herself softening, opening, allowing someone in for the first time since she'd arrived in Miami, carrying nothing but grief and determination. They hadn't crossed certain lines yet, both moving carefully, respecting boundaries. But the tension was building, sweetly unbearable, like a storm gathering strength just offshore. On Thursday morning, Maya was called into the back office 30 minutes before her shift ended. Mr. Harrison, the hotel's general manager, sat behind his oversized desk, his expression tight with barely concealed irritation. He was in his mid-50s, with thinning grey hair slicked back and a permanent sneer that suggested he'd spent his entire life disappointed by everyone around him. Maya had managed to stay mostly invisible to him over the years, which was exactly how she preferred it. "Miss Peterson," he said, not looking up from his computer screen, "we have a problem." Maya's stomach knotted. "Sir, the reservation system crashed last night during your shift. 3 VIP guests showed up for rooms that weren't properly held. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? How much revenue we could lose if word gets out that the Ocean View Grand can't even manage basic reservations?" Maya's mind raced, trying to remember the night before. "Sir, I double-checked every reservation that came through. There weren't any errors on my end. If the system crashed, that would be a technical issue, not... Are you suggesting this is IT's fault?" Harrison finally looked at her, his eyes cold. "Because that sounds an awful lot like someone refusing to take responsibility for their mistakes." "I'm not refusing anything," Maya said, keeping her voice steady even as her hands trembled. "I'm just saying that I followed protocol exactly. If there was a system failure, that's not something I could have prevented." "Convenient." Harrison leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You know what I think, Miss Peterson? I think you've been distracted lately. I think perhaps you've been paying more attention to certain guests than to your actual job." Heat flooded Maya's face. The implication was clear, and it made her feel exposed, small, like something dirty that needed to be hidden. "That's not fair." Fair? Harrison's laugh was sharp, cutting. "You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's not fair. Having a front desk employee who thinks she can socialize with VIP guests like they're her personal dating pool. Do you have any idea how that looks, what people are saying?" "I haven't done anything wrong," Maya said, but her voice was smaller now, the old insecurities rising like floodwater. Who was she kidding? Of course people were talking. Of course they noticed. Girls like her didn't date men like Alexander Kane. They were distractions, temporary amusements, cautionary tales. "You're not getting the point." Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost paternal, but with an edge of cruelty underneath. "Men like Alexander Kane don't have relationships with women like you. They have diversions, and when those diversions start affecting hotel operations and staff morale, they become my problem." So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from Mr. Kane except for strictly professional interactions. No personal conversations, no coffee dates, no whatever else you've been doing. Are we clear? Maya felt something crack inside her chest. And if I don't? Then you'll be looking for employment elsewhere. And trust me, Miss Peterson, without a reference from me, you'll find that hospitality jobs in Miami are very hard to come by. He turned back to his computer, dismissing her. You're a good worker when you stay in your lane. Don't throw that away for some fantasy that's never going to turn into anything real. Maya walked out of the office on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The words echoed in her head, each one landing like a physical blow. Men like him don't date women like you. Distractions. Fantasy. Never going to be real. She made it to the supply closet before the tears came, pressing her back against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold floor, surrounded by cleaning supplies and extra linens. She pulled her knees to her chest and let herself cry. Quietly, carefully, the way she'd learned to cry as a child when she didn't want to bother her grieving grandmother. Maybe Harrison was right. Maybe she'd been stupid to think this could be anything more than a wealthy man's momentary interest in something different. She'd seen it before, rich guests who flirted with staff, who made them feel special for a weekend before disappearing back to their real lives. Why would Alexander be any different? She didn't know how long she sat there, but eventually she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, purposeful, male. Then Alexander's voice, sharp and commanding in a way she'd never heard before. Where is she? Mr. Kane, I really don't think... That was Harrison, and he sounded nervous. I asked you a question. Where is Maya? Maya stood quickly, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself before Alexander saw her like this. Broken, crying, pathetic. But she wasn't fast enough. The supply closet door opened, and Alexander stood there, his expression thunderous, his entire body radiating barely controlled fury. Then he saw her face, and everything shifted. The anger drained away, replaced by concern so acute it was almost painful to witness. Maya. He was beside her in 2 strides, hands cupping her face, thumbs wiping away tears. What happened? What did he say to you? It's nothing, she tried, but her voice broke on the word. It's not nothing. Alexander's jaw was tight, and she could see him fighting to stay calm, to not let his anger overwhelm his concern for her. Tell me. So she did. The words spilled out. The accusation about the reservation system, the comments about being a distraction, the threat to her job, Harrison's cruel certainty that what they had wasn't real. Alexander listened, his expression growing darker with each sentence, and Maya watched the transformation happen. The gentleman who'd kissed her so carefully disappearing, replaced by the CEO who commanded boardrooms and destroyed competitors. Stay here, he said when she finished, his voice terrifyingly calm. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Alexander, don't! You'll make it worse! But he was already gone, striding back toward Harrison's office with the kind of purpose that made people move out of his way instinctively. Maya followed despite his instructions, unable to stop herself, needing to see what would happen next. Alexander didn't knock. He pushed open Harrison's office door with enough force that it banged against the wall, and Harrison looked up from his computer, his face paling when he saw who stood in his doorway. Mr. Kane, Do you have administrative access to the hotel's reservation system? Alexander interrupted, his voice cold enough to freeze. Yes, but... Show me, now. Harrison's hands fumbled with the keyboard, pulling up screens that Maya recognized from her own terminal. Alexander moved behind the desk, leaning over to examine the monitor, his eyes scanning data with the focused intensity of someone who'd built an empire on understanding systems and numbers. There, he pointed at something on the screen. That timestamp, 2:47 a.m., system maintenance override. That's when the reservation's corrupted. Who initiated that? Harrison's face had gone from pale to grey. That would be... that would be it. That would be it, Alexander repeated flatly. So when you accused Maya of making errors, when you threatened her job, when you told her she was distracted and irresponsible, you hadn't even bothered to check whether the problem was user error or system failure, had you? Mr. Kane, I was just trying to... You were trying to humiliate a young woman who has worked here for 5 years with an exemplary record because you didn't like seeing her talk to a guest. A guest, I might add, who pays more for one night in the presidential suite than Maya makes in a month. Alexander straightened to his full height, and the power differential in the room was stark, undeniable. Let me be very clear, Mr. Harrison. Maya Peterson is not a distraction. She is not overstepping. She is not doing anything wrong. What she is doing is her job with competence and grace, and in her personal time, she is seeing someone who respects and values her. If you have a problem with that, your issue is with me, not her. I didn't mean... Harrison tried, but Alexander wasn't finished. Furthermore, you will never speak to her that way again. You will not threaten her employment. You will not question her character or make implications about her relationships. And if I hear that you've created any kind of hostile work environment for Maya or any other employee, I will personally ensure that every hotel chain in Florida knows exactly what kind of manager you are. Do you understand me? Harrison nodded, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I asked you a question, Alexander said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Do you understand me? Yes, Mr. Kane, I understand. Good. Alexander turned and walked out, finding Maya standing frozen in the hallway, his expression immediately softened, the terrifying CEO disappearing again, replaced by the man who'd kissed her so gently just days before. Come on, he said quietly, taking her hand. Let's get you out of here. He led her through the lobby, past staring staff and curious guests, not caring who saw, not hiding their joined hands. Outside, the morning sun was bright and warm, Miami coming alive with tourists and traffic. Alexander guided her to a bench overlooking the ocean, and they sat. You didn't have to do that, Maya said, though her voice was thick with emotion. Yes, I did. Alexander turned to face her, his hands still holding hers. Maya, listen to me. What Harrison said, all of it, it's wrong. It's his own bitterness and prejudice talking, not truth. You are not a distraction. This, he gestured between them, is not a fantasy. It's real, more real than anything I've felt in years. But he's right about some things, Maya said, the words tasting like ash. We're from different worlds. People will always judge, and I don't know how to be the person who fits into your life. Then don't. Alexander's voice was fierce, urgent. Don't try to fit into some mold you think I need. Just be Maya. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted. He squeezed her hands. And as for different worlds, maybe we are. But Maya, I don't want my world if you're not in it. I don't want the penthouses and the galas and the business deals if at the end of the day I'm still alone. I want real. I want you. Maya felt fresh tears spill over, but these were different. Not from pain, but from overwhelming emotion, from the radical experience of being chosen, defended, seen as valuable. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm terrified that one day you'll wake up and realize you could have anyone, and you'll wonder why you settled for me. Settled. Alexander laughed, but it was gentle, affectionate. Maya, you challenge me. You make me think. You see through all the bullshit and see the person underneath. You make me want to be better, do better, live better. That's not settling. That's finding the person I didn't even know I was looking for. He pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, and Maya let herself lean into him, breathing in his scent, cedar and ocean and something uniquely him. They sat there for a long time, watching the waves crash against the shore. Neither of them speaking, just existing together in the aftermath of crisis and declaration. I'm falling for you, Maya whispered, barely audible over the sound of the ocean. "I'm falling so hard it terrifies me." Alexander pressed a kiss to the top of her head, and she felt his smile against her hair. "Good," he murmured, "because I'm already gone." Maya closed her eyes and let herself believe it, just for this moment, in this space between heartbreak and hope. She let herself believe that maybe, impossibly, this could be real. 3 days after the confrontation with Harrison, Alexander appeared at Maya's apartment early on a Saturday morning with coffee, croissants, and a proposal that made her heart race. "Come with me today," he said, standing in her doorway looking impossibly handsome in dark jeans and a simple navy button-down. "I have a business meeting in Coastal Bay, about 2 hours north. I know it's last minute, and I know you probably have plans, but I don't have plans," Maya interrupted, smiling at his unusual nervousness. "And yes." His face lit up like she'd just given him the world. "Yes, I'll come with you. Just give me 20 minutes to get ready." She changed quickly, choosing a simple sundress in pale yellow that her grandmother had sent for her birthday, and pulled her hair into a loose braid. When she emerged from the bedroom, Alexander was standing by her small bookshelf, examining the collection of worn paperbacks and library discards she'd accumulated over the years. "You kept it," he said, pulling out 100 Years of Solitude, his copy, now with her own notes added to his in the margins. "Of course I kept it," Maya said, taking the book from him and carefully placing it back. "It's my favorite thing I own." The drive north along the coast was one of those perfect Florida mornings where the sky was impossibly blue and the ocean sparkled like someone had scattered diamonds across its surface. Alexander drove with one hand on the wheel, the other linked with Maya's across the console, and they fell into easy conversation, punctuated by comfortable silences. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Maya said about an hour into the drive, watching palm trees blur past the window. Alexander glanced at her, considering. "I sing in the shower, badly, really badly, like cats being strangled bad." Maya laughed, delighted. "That's your deep, dark secret? That you can't sing?" "You haven't heard me sing," he said solemnly. "It's truly traumatic. My college roommate used to bang on the bathroom door and beg me to stop. I don't believe you're that bad." "Oh, I am." He grinned. "What about you? Deep, dark secret?" Maya was quiet for a moment, then decided if they were doing this, if this was real, it had to start with honesty. "I talk to my parents sometimes, out loud when I'm alone. I tell them about my day, ask them for advice, tell them about things I wish they could see. I know they're not really there, and I know it probably sounds crazy, but it doesn't sound crazy," Alexander said softly, squeezing her hand. "It sounds like love, like keeping them alive in the only way you can." Maya's throat tightened. "Yeah, that's exactly what it is." They drove through small coastal towns with pastel-colored buildings and seafood restaurants advertising the catch of the day. Alexander pointed out landmarks, told her stories about previous trips up this coast for business, and somehow made corporate acquisitions sound almost romantic when he described watching sunsets from hotel balconies after long days of negotiations. "Do you like what you do?" Maya asked. "Really like it, I mean. Not the success or the money, but the actual work." Alexander was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. "I'm good at it," he finally said. "I'm good at seeing patterns in markets, understanding what makes businesses succeed or fail, making decisions quickly. But do I love it?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I think I've been doing it for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to love work. It's just what I do, who I am." "That's sad," Maya said, and he looked at her sharply. "Is it?" "Yeah. Because you're so much more than your job, Alexander. You're kind and thoughtful, and you notice things about people that no one else sees. You read Garcia Marquez and make terrible jokes and remember how strangers take their coffee. That's who you are. The CEO thing is just what you do to pay bills. It just happens that your bills are much bigger than mine. Alexander pulled off the highway into a scenic overlook, put the car in park, and turned to face her fully. How do you do that? Do what? Say exactly what I need to hear without even trying, like you can see straight through to the parts of me I've forgotten existed. Maya shrugged, suddenly shy under the intensity of his gaze. Maybe because those are the parts I like best, the real parts, the human parts. He leaned across the console and kissed her, slow and sweet, and tasting of the coffee they'd shared. When he pulled back, his eyes were soft with something that looked like wonder. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For seeing me, for reminding me who I want to be." They arrived in Coastal Bay just before noon, the small harbour town charming with its fishing boats and seagulls and the smell of salt water mixing with grilled seafood. Alexander's meeting was in a glass-walled office building that looked aggressively modern compared to the quaint surroundings, and Maya waited in the car, reading and watching tourists wander past. When he emerged 90 minutes later, he looked energized, almost electric. "That went well?" Maya asked as he slid into the driver's seat. "Better than well. We just secured a partnership that's going to change the entire trajectory of our sustainability division." He paused. "Sorry, that probably sounds like boring corporate speak." "It doesn't sound boring. You sound excited. I like seeing you excited." Alexander's smile was boyish, genuine. "I am. This partnership, it's about investing in clean energy infrastructure in developing countries. Profitable but also meaningful, making money while actually helping people. It's the kind of work I've wanted to do for years, but never quite had the courage to prioritize over pure profit." "Mo. So what changed?" Maya asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "You did." He said it simply, without hesitation. "Being with you makes me want to do work that matters. Makes me want to be someone you'd be proud of." "I'm already proud of you," Maya said, and meant it completely. They had lunch at a small restaurant right on the beach, the kind of place with plastic chairs and paper plates, but fish so fresh it tasted like the ocean itself. Alexander ordered in Italian, speaking with the restaurant's owner, an elderly man from Sicily, who insisted on bringing them extra portions and a bottle of wine for the beautiful couple. "You speak Italian?" Maya asked, when the owner finally left them alone. "Italian, Spanish, French, Mandarin, and some very rusty German," Alexander admitted. "Languages were the one thing I was genuinely good at as a kid. Everything else was pressure and expectation, but languages, those were just for me." "Say something in Italian," Maya requested, enchanted by this new detail. Alexander leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers, and spoke in a low, fluid stream of Italian that sounded like music, each word flowing into the next. Maya had no idea what he was saying, but the way he was looking at her made her breath catch. "What did that mean?" she asked when he finished. "I said that sitting across from you in this moment, eating fresh fish and drinking cheap wine, I'm happier than I've been in my entire life, and that if I could freeze time, I'd choose right now. This, you." Maya felt heat flood her cheeks, her heart, her entire body. "That's not fair. You can't say things like that in languages I don't understand and expect me to function normally." "Who said anything about functioning normally?" Alexander's smile was wicked, playful in a way she'd never seen before. "Normal is overrated." After lunch, they walked along the beach, both kicking off their shoes and letting the warm sand and cool water wash over their feet. Alexander rolled up his pant legs, looking completely incongruous, this powerful CEO worth billions, walking barefoot through the surf like any regular person on vacation. "This is nice," Maya said, and the understatement made Alexander laugh. "Just nice? Okay, it's perfect. Is that what you want to hear? From you? Always." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and Maya found herself studying him, The way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, the relaxed set of his shoulders, the ease in his expression that she rarely saw when he was in the hotel, in his element of marble and luxury. Here, with sand between his toes and seagulls crying overhead, he looked younger, lighter, like someone who hadn't spent 6 years carrying the weight of an empire. "Tell me something," Maya said. "When you're alone in that presidential suite at night, what do you think about?" Alexander stopped walking, turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "Honestly, for years, I didn't think about anything. I'd work until I was exhausted, fall asleep to financial reports, wake up and do it all again. But lately," he paused, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Lately I think about a woman with kind eyes who sees past the money and the power to the lonely person underneath. I think about how her laugh sounds like sunlight, and how when she's concentrating she bites her bottom lip just slightly. I think about what it would be like to wake up next to her every morning and have that be my life instead of balance sheets and board meetings." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Alexander, I'm falling in love with you, Maya," he said, and the words were quiet but absolute, like a truth that couldn't be contained anymore. "I know it's fast, and I know it's complicated, and I know I should probably wait for the right moment to say it. But standing here right now, with you looking at me like that, I can't keep it in anymore. I'm falling in love with you, and it's terrifying and exhilarating and the most real thing I've ever felt." Maya couldn't speak. The emotions were too big, too overwhelming, crashing through her like the waves at their feet. So instead of words, she reached up, pulled his face down to hers, and kissed him. This kiss was different from the gentle ones they'd shared before. This was months of loneliness breaking open, years of solitude shattering against the shore. This was hunger and need, and the desperate recognition of finding someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway. Alexander's arms came around her, lifting her slightly, and Maya wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing closer, trying to eliminate any space between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "Maya," he whispered, and her name sounded like a prayer, a plea, a promise. "I'm falling too," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I tried not to. I tried to be smart and careful and protect myself, but I'm falling, Alexander, and I don't know how to stop." "Then don't," he said fiercely. "Don't stop. Fall with me. Let's both be terrified together." They stood there on the beach as the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, holding each other like lifelines, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't a maybe anymore. This wasn't a possibility or a fantasy. This was real, and it was happening, and there was no going back. The drive home was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts, but holding hands the entire way. That physical connection, the only anchor they needed. As Miami's skyline appeared in the distance, glittering and modern against the darkening sky, Maya felt something like fear flutter in her stomach. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Alexander glanced at her, and there was certainty in his eyes, determination that reminded her why he'd built an empire by 28. "Now we figure it out, together. Whatever comes, the judgment, the complications, the reality of two different worlds colliding, we face it together. If you want to. If you're willing to try." Maya looked at their joined hands, thought about Harrison's cruel words, about the whispers at the hotel, about every insecurity that told her this couldn't work. Then she thought about Alexander defending her, about Italian words spoken across cheap wine, about the way he saw her, really saw her, and made her feel like she was enough exactly as she was. "I'm willing," she said, and felt his hand tighten on hers. "I'm scared, but I'm willing." "Good," Alexander said, and his smile was bright enough to light up the darkening car. "Because I'm not letting you go, Maya Peterson. Not now, not ever." And as they drove back into the city, both of them knew that the easy part was over. The real test of their connection, their courage, their willingness to fight for something that made no logical sense but felt more right than anything else, was just beginning. They returned to Miami as the city transformed into its nighttime version. Neon lights reflecting off glass towers, the pulse of music drifting from beachfront clubs, the air thick with possibility, and the salt-sweet smell of ocean meeting urban sprawl. Alexander drove past the Ocean View Grand without stopping, heading instead toward Maya's neighborhood, and she felt her heartbeat accelerate with each passing block. He parked outside her building, killed the engine, and they sat in the sudden silence, both aware that something was shifting, that the evening had a momentum all its own. "Do you want to come up?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For coffee or just to talk more?" Alexander turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Maya, He paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "I want nothing more than to come up. But I need you to know there's no pressure, no expectation. If all we do is sit on your couch and talk until sunrise, that's enough. You're enough. Just being near you is enough." Maya felt something warm and certain settle in her chest. This was the moment. She could feel it. The precipice, the choice, the irrevocable step from before to after. And she wasn't afraid. Not with him, not with the man who defended her, seen her, chosen her over and over again. "Come up," she said, more firmly now. "Please." They climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell, neither speaking but hands clasped tightly together. Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she unlocked her door, hyper-aware of what he'd see. The small studio with its second-hand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling she'd tried to paint over, the tiny kitchen where she could barely turn around. It was nothing compared to his presidential suite, to the life he was accustomed to, but Alexander stepped inside and looked around with genuine interest, taking in the details that made the space hers. Books stacked on every available surface, a small collection of seashells arranged on the windowsill, photographs of her grandmother and parents in mismatched frames, a half-finished charcoal sketch of the Miami skyline taped to the wall. "This is perfect," he said quietly. "It's so completely you." Maya closed the door behind them, suddenly nervous. "It's small. It's honest." Alexander moved to examine the sketch more closely. "Did you draw this?" "Yeah. I used to draw a lot when I was younger. Haven't done much lately, but sometimes when I can't sleep, She shrugged. "It helps quiet my mind." "It's beautiful, Maya. You're incredibly talented." She moved to stand beside him, looking at her own work with critical eyes. "It's just something I do." "Nothing serious?" Alexander turned to face her fully, his expression intent. "Why do you do that? Minimize the things that make you special. Your art, your insights, your kindness. You talk about them like they're nothing when they're everything." Maya opened her mouth to deflect, to make a joke, to change the subject, but then stopped herself. He deserved better than her practiced defense mechanisms. "Because if I don't make them small," she admitted quietly, "then it hurts more when other people do." "I won't," Alexander said, and it was a vow. "I promise you, Maya, I see your gifts, and I will never make them small." The air between them felt charged, electric, heavy with everything unsaid. Maya's apartment suddenly felt tiny, the space between them both infinite and non-existent. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the heat radiating from his body, though they weren't touching. "Alexander," she said, and her voice came out breathless, uncertain. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." He waited, patient, giving her time and space. Maya took a breath, forced herself to meet his eyes. "Earlier, after our first date, I told you that I hadn't been with anyone before, and you were so kind about it, so understanding. But I need you to know." She paused, gathering courage. I'm not telling you that because I want to wait indefinitely. I'm telling you because I want it to be you. I want you to be my first, and I think I'm ready. If you are, if you want... Alexander closed the distance between them in one stride, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. Maya, are you sure? Because we don't have to rush anything. I meant what I said. There's no pressure, no timeline. I'm sure, Maya whispered. I've never been more sure of anything. I trust you, Alexander. I trust you with this, with me. He kissed her then, and it was different from every kiss before, deeper, more intentional, infused with promise and desire and something that felt like reverence. Maya's hands found his shirt, fisting in the fabric, pulling him closer, and she felt him respond, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly so their bodies aligned perfectly. They moved together toward her bed, really just a mattress on a simple frame, pushed against the far wall, stumbling slightly, laughing softly against each other's mouths. The late afternoon sun filtered through her thin curtains, casting everything in warm golden light that made the shabby room feel sacred, transformed. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Maya to stand between his legs, and looked up at her with such naked emotion that she felt tears prick her eyes. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "So incredibly beautiful." "So are you," Maya whispered, running her fingers through his hair, marveling at the softness, at the fact that she was allowed to touch him like this, intimately, without pretense. He reached for the zipper of her sundress, then paused. "Tell me if anything doesn't feel right. Promise me. At any point, if you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no disappointment." "Okay." "Okay," Maya agreed, touched by his careful concern. "I promise." Slowly, deliberately, he unzipped her dress, letting it pool at her feet. Maya fought the urge to cover herself, to hide the imperfections she'd catalogued in mirrors for years. But the way Alexander was looking at her, with wonder and desire and something that looked like awe, made her feel beautiful in a way she never had before. She reached for the buttons of his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly, and he helped her, shrugging out of the fabric and tossing it aside. Maya pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her hand, realizing he was nervous too, that this mattered to him as much as it did to her. They fell back onto the bed together, a tangle of limbs and soft laughter and increasingly urgent kisses. Alexander took his time, mapping every inch of her skin with his hands and mouth, asking questions. "Is this okay? Does this feel good? Tell me what you need." Treating her pleasure like a puzzle he was determined to solve with patience and attention. Maya had expected awkwardness, had braced herself for discomfort or embarrassment. But with Alexander there was only tenderness and growing heat, the sense of being cherished and desired in equal measure. He moved slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of pain or hesitation, and when they finally came together completely, Maya gasped. Not from discomfort, but from the overwhelming intimacy of it, the vulnerability of letting someone inside her body and heart simultaneously. "Okay?" Alexander asked, his voice strained with the effort of staying still, of letting her adjust. "Yes," Maya breathed. "Yes. Don't stop." They found a rhythm together, slow and deep and utterly consuming. Maya held on to him like an anchor, overwhelmed by sensation and emotion, by the realization that this connection, this merging, was what people wrote songs and poetry about, what made people do reckless, beautiful, terrifying things. This was what it meant to be truly seen, truly known, truly chosen. When they reached the peak together, Maya cried out, burying her face in Alexander's shoulder, and felt him shudder against her, breathing her name like a prayer. They stayed joined for a long moment after, neither wanting to break the connection, both trying to catch their breath and make sense of what had just happened. Finally, Carefully, Alexander rolled to the side, pulling Maya with him, so they were tangled together, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. The golden afternoon light had deepened to amber, shadows lengthening across the small room, and outside they could hear the distant sounds of the city, traffic, voices, the constant hum of Miami life continuing around them. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Maya smiled against his chest. "I'm more than okay. That was—" She searched for adequate words and came up empty. "There are no words." "Yeah," Alexander agreed, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "There really aren't." They lay there in comfortable silence, fingers tracing idle patterns on skin, legs intertwined, breathing synchronized. Maya felt safe in a way she hadn't since her parents died, truly deeply safe, like she'd found harbor after years of drifting. "Can I tell you something?" Alexander said eventually, his voice quiet in the dimming light. "Anything. I've been with other people before. You know that. But I've never—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I've never felt what I just felt with you. That wasn't just sex, Maya. That was profound, transformative, like every other time before this was just going through motions. And this was the first time I actually understood what it was supposed to be." Maya lifted her head to look at him, saw the vulnerability in his expression, the raw honesty. "I don't have anything to compare it to," she admitted. "But I can't imagine it being better with anyone else. I can't imagine wanting anyone else, period." Alexander's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "I love you," he said. And this time the words came easily, naturally, like he'd been saying them his whole life. "I am completely, irrevocably in love with you, Maya Peterson." "I love you too," Maya whispered, and felt the truth of it resonate through her entire body. "I love you so much, it scares me." "Good," Alexander said, pulling her closer. "Love should be a little scary. It means it matters. It means we have something real to lose, which means we have something real to fight for." They made love again as evening deepened into night, slower this time, more exploratory, learning each other's bodies and responses with careful attention. Afterward, they raided Maya's modest kitchen, making sandwiches and eating them in bed, while discussing everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, dreams they'd never spoken aloud, fears they'd carried alone for too long. At some point, wrapped in sheets and each other, they drifted into sleep, Maya's head on Alexander's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her, both of them breathing in sync. For the first time in years, neither of them had nightmares. For the first time in years, they both felt like they'd come home. Outside, Miami continued its restless pulse, lights glittering, music playing, the ocean rolling endlessly against the shore. But inside Maya's small apartment, two people who'd been lonely their entire lives had finally, miraculously, found each other. And in the morning, when golden light filtered through the curtains and Maya woke to find Alexander still there, still holding her, still choosing her in the clear light of day, that's when she knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed. This wasn't a fantasy or a distraction or a temporary escape. This was real. This was love. And whatever came next, they would face it together. Maya should have known that happiness this profound couldn't exist in a vacuum, should have anticipated that in a place like the Ocean View Grand, where gossip traveled faster than room service and privacy was a luxury reserved for guests, never staff, their relationship would become public knowledge eventually. But she'd been living in a bubble of Alexander's arms and whispered promises, too intoxicated by newfound love to see the storm gathering on the horizon. The first crack in her protective bubble came 3 days after the night they'd first made love. Maya was arriving for her shift, still glowing with the memory of waking up in Alexander's arms that morning, when she noticed Mrs. Chen, the building superintendent, who also happened to be cousin to one of the housekeeping staff, standing outside her apartment building with two other neighborhood women, their conversation stopping abruptly when they saw her. "Good evening, Mrs. Chen," Maya said pleasantly, as she always did. Mrs. Chen's smile was tight, almost pitying. "Good evening, Maya. Working tonight?" "Yes, ma'am, as always." Mrs. Chen exchanged glances with the other women. "Well, you be careful, dear. Men like that—" She paused meaningfully. "They don't usually stick around." Maya felt heat flood her face, understanding immediately what was being implied. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Of course you don't, dear." Mrs. Chen's tone was patronizing, almost maternal, which somehow made it worse. "Just remember, when it ends, you're the one who'll still be here. He'll go back to his real life, and you'll be left picking up the pieces." Maya mumbled something polite and hurried past, her heart pounding with humiliation and anger. How did Mrs. Chen know? She must have seen Alexander leaving her apartment, must have recognized him from the hotel. His face had been in Forbes and Bloomberg often enough. And if Mrs. Chen knew, then her cousin in housekeeping knew, which meant everyone knew. Maya's fears were confirmed the moment she walked into the hotel's back entrance. The usual chatter among the night staff died immediately, replaced by loaded silence and averted eyes. Sarah, a fellow front desk clerk who'd always been friendly, suddenly became very interested in her phone. Miguel from maintenance, who usually greeted her with a warm, "Hey, Maya," kept his eyes fixed firmly on the floor as he passed. Only Jessica, one of the housekeepers, met her eyes directly, and what Maya saw there made her stomach drop. Pity mixed with judgment, curiosity tinged with condescension. "Maya," Jessica said, her voice carrying in the quiet hallway. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Maya wanted to refuse, wanted to pretend everything was fine and head to her post, but Jessica was already walking toward her, determination in every step. "Look," Jessica said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were relatively alone. "I'm telling you this as a friend, okay? People are talking about you and Mr. Kane." "Let them talk," Maya said, lifting her chin even as her heart raced with anxiety. "It's not that simple." Jessica's expression was genuinely concerned, which somehow made it worse than if she'd been cruel. They're saying you're using him to get ahead, that you're sleeping with a VIP guest to get a promotion or money or I don't know what, and some people are saying he's just, using you. That rich guys do this all the time with pretty staff members, and it never ends well. "That's not what this is," Maya said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "I believe you," Jessica said, and maybe she even meant it. "But Maya, you have to understand how it looks. Harrison is furious. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're a liability, that you're creating drama and distracting important guests, and the other girls—" She trailed off, uncomfortable. "What about the other girls?" Jessica sighed. "They're jealous, mostly. You landed a billionaire while the rest of us are working double shifts to make rent. They're saying things, mean things, like you must have done something special for him, if you know what I mean." I get it," Maya interrupted, not wanting to hear the rest. "Thanks for the warning." She turned and walked to the reception desk, feeling eyes following her every step, hearing whispers that stopped just as she got close enough to make out words. The night stretched ahead of her like a prison sentence, 8 hours of judgment and speculation, of being watched and evaluated and found wanting. The worst part was the guests. Word had spread beyond the staff, carried by gossiping housekeepers and chatty concierges, and now some of the regular visitors looked at her differently. A businessman who'd always been polite now leered openly. A woman in designer clothes gave her a once-over dripping with disdain and said loud enough for others to hear, "I suppose anyone can improve their situation with the right assets." Maya kept her head down, focused on her work, and tried to ignore the burning behind her eyes that threatened tears. This was what she'd feared from the beginning. being reduced to a stereotype, a cautionary tale, proof that girls like her didn't belong in worlds like Alexander's. By her break at 3 a.m., Maya was barely holding herself together. She retreated to the same supply closet where Alexander had found her weeks ago, pressing her back against the wall and finally letting the tears fall. Her phone buzzed, a text from Alexander. "Missing you, can't sleep, keep thinking about this morning, waking up with you. When can I see you again?" The message should have made her smile, should have warmed her from the inside out. Instead, it made her cry harder, because he was in his perfect presidential suite, insulated from judgment and gossip, while she was hiding in a supply closet, crying over the cruelty of strangers who thought they knew her story. The next few days were worse. Harrison, emboldened by the gossip and clearly resentful of Alexander's earlier defense of Maya, began watching her like a hawk, noting every tiny infraction, criticizing her work with newfound severity. When she clocked in 2 minutes late due to traffic, he wrote her up. When a guest complaint came in about slow service during a night when they were understaffed and she was managing 3 tasks simultaneously, he called her into his office and threatened her with suspension. "This is what happens," Harrison said, leaning back in his chair with undisguised satisfaction, "when employees forget their place, when they start thinking they're special because they've caught the attention of someone wealthy. You're not special, Miss Peterson. You're a replaceable entry-level employee who is currently creating a hostile work environment through your inappropriate relationship with a guest." "It's not inappropriate," Maya said, but even she could hear the lack of conviction in her voice. "We're both adults. We're not breaking any rules." "Technically, no." Harrison's smile was cold. "But you're breaking something far more important: decorum, discretion, professional boundaries, and whether you want to admit it or not, you're making this hotel look bad. When VIP guests engage in relationships with staff members, it reflects poorly on our brand. So, if Alexander weren't staying here, if we'd met somewhere else, this would be fine. If you'd met somewhere else, you never would have met at all," Harrison said bluntly. "Men like Alexander Kane don't date women like you unless there's proximity and convenience involved. And when the novelty wears off, and it will, Maya, trust me, he'll move on to the next pretty face, and you'll be left here, damaged goods with a reputation that will follow you for years." The words landed like physical blows, each one striking at Maya's deepest insecurities, because wasn't that exactly what she'd feared? That Alexander would wake up one day and realize he could have anyone, sophisticated, educated, wealthy women who knew how to navigate his world, and wonder what he'd been thinking, slumming with a receptionist from rural Texas. That evening, when Alexander texted asking to see her, Maya made an excuse about being tired. The next day, when he appeared at the front desk with his usual coffee offering, she was polite but distant, professional in a way that made his eyes cloud with confusion and hurt. "Maya, what's wrong?" he asked quietly, leaning across the desk, not caring who might see. "Did something happen?" "Everything's fine," she lied, not meeting his eyes. "Just busy. Lots of work." "Don't do that." His voice was firm. "Don't shut me out. Talk to me." But Maya couldn't find the words to explain that her co-workers thought she was a gold digger, that her building superintendent pitied her, that her boss was actively trying to get her fired, that everywhere she turned, people were whispering about what a billionaire could possibly want with someone so ordinary. Couldn't admit that maybe, secretly, she was starting to wonder the same thing. "I really need to work," she said, turning back to her computer. "Maybe we can talk later." Alexander stayed there for a long moment, and Maya could feel his gaze on her, searching, worried. Finally, he left without another word, and Maya felt something crack in her chest, the first real fracture in their perfect bubble. The breaking point came a week later. A guest, a drunk businessman in his 50s, approached the desk at 2 a.m., leering at Maya with open contempt. "You're the one, aren't you?" he slurred. "The girl sleeping with Kane. Gotta say, sweetheart, I get it. You're a pretty little thing. If I'd known the staff here were so accommodating, I would have tried my luck. Maya's face flamed. Sir, I need to ask you to— How much? The man interrupted, pulling out his wallet. How much for a night? If you're good enough for a billionaire, you must be worth it, right? Name your price. The words hung in the air, vile and degrading, and Maya felt something inside her shatter completely. Before she could respond, before she could even process what had just been said to her, a voice cut through the lobby like a blade. What did you just say to her? Alexander appeared from the direction of the elevators, and the expression on his face was terrifying. Cold fury, barely contained beneath a veneer of civilized restraint. He walked straight to the drunk man, positioning himself between the guest and Maya, his posture radiating danger. I asked you a question, Alexander repeated, his voice deadly quiet. What did you say to her? The drunk man, suddenly aware of who he was facing, paled. I was just joking, man. I didn't mean— You propositioned her. You treated her like a prostitute, in the lobby of this hotel, in front of witnesses. Alexander's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Do you have any idea what I could do to you? One phone call, and you'll never book a hotel room anywhere in this country again. One word to your employer. He glanced at the man's room keycard, which had his company logo, and you'll be unemployed by morning. Alexander, don't, Maya said quietly, but he didn't turn around. Apologize, Alexander commanded. Apologize to her right now, or I swear to God— I'm sorry, the man stammered, looking at Maya with fear replacing the earlier contempt. I'm sorry, I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Get out of my sight, Alexander said, his voice shaking with barely restrained rage. Before I forget, I'm a civilized person and do something we'll both regret. The man fled toward the elevators, and Alexander finally turned to Maya. His expression immediately softened, fury giving way to concern. Are you okay? Did he touch you? I swear if he— I'm fine, Maya said. But she wasn't. She was shaking, humiliated, devastated that this had happened here in public, with staff members watching from corners and doorways. This would be all over the hotel by morning, more fuel for the gossip fire, more proof that she was causing problems, creating drama, exactly what Harrison had accused her of. Come on, Alexander said, reaching for her hand. Let's get you out of here. You don't need to finish this shift. I'll talk to— No. Maya pulled her hand away, and she saw him flinch like she'd struck him. No, Alexander, don't you see? This is exactly the problem. You defending me, making scenes, using your power to solve my problems. It's making everything worse. So what? I should have let him talk to you like that. Alexander's voice rose slightly, frustrated and confused. Let him treat you like— Maybe you should have stayed upstairs, Maya said, and hated herself for the words even as they came out. Maybe if you weren't constantly coming down here, constantly making it obvious that we're together, people wouldn't be treating me like this. Alexander stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he didn't understand. Are you saying you want me to hide? Pretend we're not together? Pretend I don't care about you? I'm saying— Maya's voice broke, tears finally spilling over. I'm saying I don't know how to do this, Alexander. I don't know how to be with you when everyone is watching, judging, waiting for me to fail, when my boss is looking for reasons to fire me, when my co-workers think I'm using you, when guests proposition me like I'm for sale because they think that's what I am to you. I don't know how to be me when I'm with you, because when I'm with you, I disappear. In my world, I'm the sun, but in your world, you're the sun, and I'm just the girl who got burned trying to get too close. The words came from somewhere deep and terrified, the fears she'd been suppressing for weeks finally erupting. Alexander looked stricken, reaching for her again, but Maya stepped back. I need to finish my shift, she said, wiping her eyes roughly. Please, just go. Maya, please. Alexander stood there for a long moment, his expression a mixture of pain and frustration and something that looked like understanding. Finally, he nodded once, turned, and walked away, his shoulders tight with tension. Maya watched him go and felt her heart break completely. Because she loved him, God, she loved him so much it physically hurt. But loving him was destroying her. And she didn't know how to choose between love and survival, between the man who made her feel alive and the life she'd built to keep herself safe. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of numbness and routine. And when Maya finally left the hotel at 7 a.m., stepping into the harsh Miami sunlight, she knew with terrible certainty that something had to change. She couldn't keep doing this, loving someone while losing herself, finding connection while watching her dignity erode piece by piece. Something had to give, and she was terrified that what would break would be them. For 3 days, Maya avoided Alexander completely. She ignored his texts, didn't answer his calls, and arranged her breaks to ensure they wouldn't overlap with his usual visits to the lobby. It was cowardly, she knew, but she needed time to think, to figure out what she wanted versus what she could actually handle. The distinction between the two had never felt more important or more impossible to navigate. On the third night, Harrison called her into his office again. Maya went with a sense of resignation, already knowing what was coming. "Miss Peterson," Harrison said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I'm going to be direct. Your performance has been declining, your presence is causing tension among staff and guests, and frankly, you've become more trouble than you're worth. I'm giving you a choice. Resign voluntarily with a neutral reference, or I'll begin formal termination proceedings that will go on your permanent record." Maya felt numb, almost detached, like this was happening to someone else. "When do you need my decision?" "End of week." Harrison's expression was almost sympathetic, which was somehow worse than his usual contempt. "Look, I'm not a monster. I understand you got in over your head with someone completely inappropriate for your station. It happens. Young women see a rich, handsome man and lose perspective. But now it's time to face reality and minimize the damage. Cut your losses, Maya. Move on before this gets worse." Maya walked out of his office feeling hollowed out, empty of everything except exhaustion. She'd worked at the Ocean View Grand for 5 years. 5 years of overnight shifts, of being reliable and competent and invisible. And it had taken less than 2 months for one relationship, one beautiful, complicated, impossible relationship, to destroy everything she'd built. That night, Alexander was waiting outside the hotel when her shift ended. He was leaning against his car, arms crossed, his expression determined. Maya's heart clenched at the sight of him, disheveled from lack of sleep, his usual polish replaced by raw desperation. "We need to talk," he said when she approached. "Really talk, Maya. Not with you running away or shutting me out, please." She was too tired to argue. "Okay." They drove to Lagoon Plaza, a small park near the beach that was quiet at this hour, just the distant sound of waves and the occasional passing car. They sat on a bench overlooking the water, and for a long moment neither spoke, both staring at the dark ocean as if it held answers. "Harrison's trying to force me out," Maya said finally. "Resign or be fired. That's my choice." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Then I'll handle Harrison. I'll buy the goddamn hotel if I have to." "No." Maya turned to face him. "You can't fix this with money or power, Alexander. That's the problem. Every time you swoop in to rescue me, it makes things worse. It proves everyone right, that I'm not capable of handling my own life, that I need you to fight my battles, that without you, I'm nothing." "That's not true," Alexander said fiercely. "You're everything, Maya, with or without me." "Then why doesn't it feel that way?" Maya's voice cracked. "Why do I feel like I'm disappearing, like I'm losing myself piece by piece every day? I look in the mirror and I don't recognize who's looking back anymore. I used to be this person who knew who she was, what she wanted, simple life, simple dreams. But now..." She gestured helplessly between them. Now I don't know anything except that loving you is the most beautiful and most painful thing I've ever experienced. Alexander reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. Tell me what you need, he said quietly. Tell me how to make this work, and I'll do it. Anything, Maya. I'll do anything. I need... Maya paused, trying to articulate feelings she'd been avoiding for weeks. I need to figure out who I am before I can be part of we. Because right now, in your world, I'm the girl who dates Alexander Kane. That's my entire identity. I'm not Maya Peterson anymore. I'm not the girl from Texas with dreams of teaching or writing. I'm not even the reliable night receptionist. I'm just yours. And as beautiful as that sounds, it's also terrifying. Because what happens when you wake up one day and decide I'm not enough? What happens when the novelty wears off and you realize you've been slumming with someone who doesn't fit your life? I'll have lost myself completely for something that was never really mine to begin with. You are mine, Alexander said, his voice rough with emotion, and I'm yours. That's not temporary or conditional. That's... You don't understand. Maya pulled her hand away, standing up, needing distance to say what came next. In your world, Alexander, you're the sun. Everything revolves around you, your money, your power, your decisions, and that's fine. That's who you are. But in my world, I'm the sun. I'm the center of my own small universe, and when those two worlds collide, when we try to exist in the same space, I'm the one who disappears. I'm the one whose light gets swallowed by yours. Not because you're trying to eclipse me, but because that's just how the physics of our situation work. Alexander stood too, and she could see the fear in his eyes now, the dawning realization of what she was saying. What are you telling me, Maya? She took a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. I'm telling you that I need to go home, back to Texas. I need to be somewhere where I'm not defined by you, where I can remember who I was before all this. I need to figure out how to be me, really me, before I can give pieces of myself to someone else. How long? Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. And that was the most honest answer she had. I don't know if it's weeks or months or... Don't say forever, he interrupted, and the pain in his voice almost broke her resolve. Please don't say forever. I love you, Maya said, and meant it with everything she had. I love you so much that I'm willing to walk away to figure out how to love you without losing myself in the process. Because if I stay now, like this, we'll destroy each other. You'll resent me for being weak, for needing constant rescue. I'll resent you for being strong, for making me feel small even when you're trying to make me feel safe. And eventually, we'll hate each other for ruining something that started out so beautiful. Alexander closed the distance between them, cupping her face with both hands, his thumbs wiping away tears. I could never hate you. Never, Maya. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, she whispered back, which is exactly why I need to do this, because you deserve someone who's whole, who's strong, who can stand beside you as an equal. And right now, I'm not that person. But maybe, if I go home, if I take time, if I figure out who Maya Peterson really is, maybe I can become her. And if you do, Alexander said, his forehead pressed against hers, his voice breaking, will you come back to me? I don't know, Maya admitted, because lies would be crueler than truth. I honestly don't know, but I know that if I stay now, we'll lose each other anyway. At least this way there's hope. At least this way, we're choosing to pause instead of letting things shatter beyond repair. They stood there in the quiet park, holding each other as if they could somehow freeze this moment, postpone the inevitable goodbye through sheer force of will. Maya memorized everything, the way he smelled like cedar and ocean, the warmth of his body against hers, the sound of his heartbeat under her ear, the way his arms felt like the safest place in the world, even as she prepared to leave them. When? Alexander finally asked. Tomorrow. I've already bought the bus ticket. Let me drive you or fly you. My plane can—" "No." Maya pulled back to look at him. "I need to do this myself. The way I came here 5 years ago, on my own, with one suitcase, figuring it out as I go. That's who I need to be again." Alexander's expression was devastated, but he nodded. "Can I ask you one thing?" "Anything. Don't disappear completely. Text me sometimes. Let me know you're okay. I don't need details or explanations, just let me know you're alive and safe, please." "I can do that," Maya agreed, and saw relief flicker across his features. They kissed then, one last time, slow and sweet and absolutely heartbreaking. It was a kiss that tasted like goodbye and maybe and I love you and I'm sorry all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying openly, not bothering to hide the tears. "I should go," Maya whispered, though every cell in her body was screaming to stay, to take it back, to choose love over growth, and hope he'd be enough to fill the empty spaces. "I'll wait," Alexander said. "However long it takes, Maya, I'll wait. And if you decide you don't want to come back, if you find happiness somewhere else, with someone else, I'll understand. I'll hurt like hell, but I'll understand. Because all I want is for you to be happy. Even if that happiness doesn't include me." Maya pressed one last kiss to his lips, quick and desperate, then turned and walked away before her resolve could crumble. Each step felt like moving through cement, like fighting against gravity itself. She heard him call her name once, soft, broken, but she didn't turn around, couldn't turn around. If she looked back at him standing there in the darkness, alone and hurting, she'd run back to him and they'd be right back where they started. She walked the 3 miles to her apartment, letting the physical exertion burn through some of the emotional pain. Inside, she pulled out her old suitcase and started packing. The same suitcase she'd arrived with 5 years ago, now held together with duct tape and determination. She packed practically, efficiently, leaving behind anything that wouldn't fit or wasn't essential. The last thing she packed was 100 Years of Solitude, Alexander's copy, with their combined annotations filling the margins. She held it for a long moment, debating. This was his. She should return it. But the thought of giving it back felt like admitting defeat, like saying goodbye forever. In the end, she kept it. Not as a promise or a claim, but as a reminder of who she'd been becoming, of what was possible when 2 lonely people found each other, of love that was real even if the timing was wrong. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. "I love you. Whatever happens, wherever you go, that doesn't change. I love you, Maya Peterson." She typed back through tears. "I love you too. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for everything." Then she turned off her phone, finished packing, and sat on her bed in the empty apartment, watching dawn break over Miami through her small window. In 6 hours, she'd be on a bus heading west, back to the small Texas town she'd fled 5 years ago, back to her grandmother and bluebonnets and a life where things made sense. She was terrified. She was heartbroken. But somewhere underneath the pain, she was also hopeful. Because for the first time in months, she was choosing herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward becoming someone strong enough to choose love without losing herself in the process. As the sun rose over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and pink, Maya whispered to the empty room, "I'll come back. When I'm ready, when I'm whole, I'll come back to you." She didn't know if it was a promise or a prayer. But it was enough to get her on that bus, enough to carry her home, enough to start the long, difficult work of finding herself again. And 24 floors above, in a presidential suite that suddenly felt like a prison, Alexander Kane stood at the window watching the sunrise and wondering how something so beautiful could hurt so much. The bus ride to Texas took 18 hours, stopping in small towns Maya had never heard of, picking up and dropping off travelers who all seemed to carry their own stories of escape or return. Maya sat by the window, watching the landscape transform from Miami's urban sprawl to the flat, endless plains of her childhood, and felt something inside her begin to shift, not healing exactly, but settling, like bones finding their proper alignment after a break. Her grandmother Diane was waiting at the bus station in Millbrook, leaning against her ancient pickup truck, arms crossed, her weathered face breaking into a smile when she saw Maya emerge with her taped-together suitcase. Diane was 72, small and wiry, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, and she had the kind of strength that came from surviving droughts and raising children and burying people you loved. "Welcome home, baby girl," Diane said, pulling Maya into a hug that smelled like lavender soap and sun-dried cotton. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, just held her granddaughter until Maya's shoulders stopped shaking, then loaded the suitcase into the truck bed and drove them home in comfortable silence. The farmhouse looked exactly as Maya remembered. White clapboard siding needing paint, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs, fields of wheat stretching in every direction like an ocean frozen mid-wave. It was the opposite of Miami in every way. Quiet where Miami was loud, still where Miami was restless, rooted where Miami was transient. For the first week, Maya did nothing but sleep. She slept 14, 16 hours a day, her body finally releasing years of accumulated exhaustion from night shifts and emotional upheaval. Diane let her be, leaving food on the nightstand, checking in with gentle touches but no words. It was a gift, the space to simply exist without explanation or performance. When Maya finally emerged from the fog of exhaustion, she found herself falling into the rhythm of farm life. She helped Diane with morning chores, feeding chickens, collecting eggs, tending the vegetable garden. The physical work was grounding, each task simple and concrete with clear beginning and end. Plant seeds, pull weeds, water plants, results you could see and measure, unlike the complicated emotional mathematics of love and identity. But the depression came anyway, settling over her like a heavy blanket she couldn't shake off. She'd go through the motions of the day, then sit on the porch at night staring at stars so bright they hurt, and feel absolutely nothing, empty, hollow, like she'd left pieces of herself scattered across the miles between Texas and Florida. Her phone stayed mostly off. She'd turn it on once a day to send Alexander a brief text, "I'm okay, still figuring things out," and he'd respond with equal brevity, "Take your time, I'm here." Sometimes he'd add small details about his day, little offerings that asked nothing in return. "Saw a hummingbird today and thought of you." Reading Marquez again. "Your notes are better than mine. The hotel feels empty without you." Maya never responded to those messages beyond reading them, but she saved every single one. 3 weeks into her stay, Diane finally broke the silence. They were shelling peas on the porch, the sun setting in streaks of orange and purple, when her grandmother spoke. "You planning to tell me what sent you running home, or are we going to keep pretending everything's fine?" Maya's hands stilled. "It's complicated. Love usually is." Diane didn't look up from her work, fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Especially when you're scared of it." "I'm not scared of love," Maya protested. "I'm scared of losing myself." "Same thing sometimes." Diane glanced over, her blue eyes sharp despite her age. "Your daddy almost left your mama 3 times before they got married. Did I ever tell you that?" Maya shook her head, surprised. Her parents' love story had always been presented as simple, straightforward. High school sweethearts who never looked at anyone else. He'd get right up to the altar, then panic and run. Not because he didn't love her, he loved her too much, scared him half to death. The idea of needing someone that badly, of giving someone that much power to hurt him. Diane smiled at the memory. Your mama finally cornered him at the hardware store and told him he had 2 choices. Stop running and marry her, or stay gone for good because she was done chasing. said she loved him, but she loved herself more, and she wasn't going to spend her life begging someone to choose her. What did he do? Maya asked. Though she knew the answer, her parents had been married for 20 years before the accident. He showed up at her house that night with a ring from his grandmother and a promise to stop running. And he did. They built a beautiful life together. Not perfect, not without fights and hard times, but real, solid. Diane set down the bowl of peas and turned to face Maya fully. You know what your mama taught him? That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay when everything in you is screaming to run. The words hit Maya like a physical blow, resonating with something deep and true she'd been avoiding. But I needed to leave, she said weakly. I needed to find myself. Did you? Diane's voice was gentle but firm. Or did you need to run because things got hard and you were scared? Because from where I'm sitting, baby girl, you didn't come home to find yourself. You came home to hide. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's true. Diane reached over and took Maya's hand. I raised you to be strong, Maya, but I didn't raise you to be afraid of living. And right now, you're not living. You're existing, going through motions, waiting for some magical moment when you'll suddenly feel ready or worthy or brave enough. But that moment doesn't come, sweetheart. You have to make it come. What if I go back and I'm still not enough? Maya whispered. What if I'm still the girl who disappears in his shadow? Then you shine brighter, Diane said simply. Or you walk away for real. But you don't get to hide in the middle ground, pretending you're doing soul-searching when really you're just scared. That's not growth, Maya. That's cowardice dressed up pretty. The words stung, but they also cracked something open inside Maya's chest. Something that had been sealed shut since the night she left Miami. She cried then, really cried, and Diane held her like she had when Maya was 5 and freshly orphaned, letting her granddaughter fall apart without trying to fix it. That night, unable to sleep, Maya went through the box of her parents' belongings that Diane had saved, photographs, letters, small mementos of a life cut short. She found something she'd never seen before, a letter from her father to her mother, written during one of his pre-wedding panics. Sarah, it read in her father's careful handwriting, I'm terrified of how much I love you, terrified that needing you this much makes me weak, that giving you my heart means losing myself. But then I think about a life without you, safe, controlled, lonely, and I realize I'd rather be terrified with you than comfortable without you. I'd rather risk everything for a chance at real happiness than spend my life protecting myself from pain. You make me braver than I am on my own. So I'm asking, will you be patient with me while I learn to stop running? Will you hold my hand while I figure out how to be the man you deserve? I love you. I choose you. Even when I'm scared. Especially when I'm scared. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face, her father's words echoing her own fears and struggles with eerie precision. She'd been so convinced that leaving was the brave choice, the strong choice. But maybe true courage wasn't in running away to find yourself. Maybe it was in staying and building yourself while staying connected to love. She thought about Alexander, about the way he saw her, challenged her, made her want to be more than she'd allowed herself to dream. She thought about his patience, the daily texts that asked nothing, the way he'd let her go even when it destroyed him, the promise to wait however long it took. That wasn't someone who wanted to eclipse her. That was someone who wanted to stand beside her while she learned to shine. And she thought about herself, not the frightened girl who'd arrived in Miami 5 years ago, not the insecure receptionist who'd felt small in the face of judgment, but the woman she'd been becoming before fear took over. The woman who'd challenged a CEO about whether life was now or later. The woman who'd walked away from comfort to protect something precious. The woman who'd loved bravely, even if briefly. That woman was still in there. She didn't need to find her, she just needed to choose her. The next morning, Maya found Diane in the kitchen making coffee. "I need to go back," she said without preamble. Diane looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face. "About damn time." "Not because I'm running back to him," Maya clarified, "because I'm running toward myself, the version of me that was brave enough to love him in the first place. I got lost in the fear and the judgment and the idea that I had to be perfect before I deserved happiness. But Grandma, he never asked for perfect. He just asked for real. And I think I'm finally ready to give him that." "Then you better get packing," Diane said, pulling Maya into a hug. "But Maya, this time you go back as yourself. Not as his girlfriend or his appendage, but as Maya Peterson, strong, talented, worthy woman who's choosing to share her life with someone, not disappear into his. You hear me?" "I hear you," Maya promised. She spent the next 3 days preparing. Not just packing, but planning. She researched online college programs, looking at creative writing and education degrees she could pursue remotely. She updated her resume, applied to jobs in Miami that weren't at the Ocean View Grand, positions at libraries, community centers, places that aligned with her actual values rather than just paying bills. She wrote down boundaries and needs, things she'd compromised on before that she wouldn't again. And she read through every text Alexander had sent over the past 8 weeks. Dozens of them, small windows into his days, his thoughts, his unwavering belief that she was worth waiting for. The messages chronicled his own journey, leaving the hotel, refocusing his business on meaningful investments, starting a foundation for young entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds. He'd been growing too, Maya realized, becoming more of himself, just as she had. On her last night in Texas, Maya sat with her grandmother under a sky full of stars, drinking sweet tea and watching lightning bugs dance in the wheat fields. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, "for being patient with me, for loving me enough to tell me hard truths. That's what family does," Diane said. "We hold up mirrors even when we don't want to look. And Maya, I'm proud of you. Not for going back to him, but for going back to yourself, for choosing courage over comfort." "I'm still scared," Maya admitted. "Good. Means it matters." Diane squeezed her hand. "Now go show that boy what he's been waiting for. And if he doesn't treat you right, if he tries to make you small or takes you for granted, you come straight back here and we'll egg his fancy car." Maya laughed through tears. "Deal." The next morning, she boarded a bus heading east, the same route in reverse with the same taped-together suitcase, but carrying something new, not just hope, but certainty. She was going back to Miami, back to Alexander, but more importantly, back to herself. And this time, she wasn't running from anything. She was running toward everything she'd been too afraid to claim before. Love and identity, connection and independence, the radical possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could have both. As the Texas landscape gave way to Louisiana bayous and eventually Florida coastline, Maya pulled out her phone and typed a message she'd been composing mentally for days. "I'm coming home. Not because I need you, but because I choose you. There's a difference, and I finally understand it. I love you, Alexander Kane, and I'm ready to figure out how to love you without losing myself in the process, if you're still willing to try." His response came within seconds, just 2 words that made her heart soar. "I'm here." Maya smiled, watching the landscape blur past, and felt herself finally completely come back to life. Maya arrived in Miami on a Saturday afternoon, the city welcoming her back with its familiar chaos, honking horns, palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze, the thick humidity that made the air feel like a warm embrace. But she didn't go straight to Alexander. Not yet. First, she needed to prove something to herself. She rented a small studio apartment in a different neighborhood, modest but hers, paid for with savings she'd carefully guarded. She applied to 3 jobs and got callbacks from 2 within days. The one she accepted was at a tourism agency downtown, helping visitors plan authentic Miami experiences, a job that used her knowledge of the city and her natural warmth with people, but on her own terms, in her own space. For 3 weeks, Maya rebuilt her life independently. She furnished her apartment with thrift store finds and DIY projects. She enrolled in 2 online classes, Introduction to Creative Writing and American Literature. She reconnected with a few former co-workers from the hotel who'd reached out during her absence, coffee dates where she learned to set boundaries, to be friendly without being a pushover. She didn't contact Alexander beyond that single text from the bus. It wasn't a game or a test, it was a promise to herself. She needed to prove she could stand on her own, could be whole and complete without him, so that when they came back together, it would be as 2 full people choosing connection, not 2 halves desperately clinging to wholeness. But God, she missed him. Every day, every hour, an ache so profound it was almost physical. She'd see something, a hummingbird at her window, a man reading Garcia Marquez on the bus, the particular shade of grey-blue in the ocean before a storm, and her first instinct was to share it with him. But she held back, trusting the process, trusting herself. On her 4th Saturday in Miami, Maya walked into her favorite cafe, a small place near her apartment with mismatched furniture and the best Cuban coffee in the neighborhood. She ordered her usual, found a table by the window, and pulled out her laptop to work on an essay for her writing class. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice him at first, didn't see the figure standing in the doorway, scanning the cafe with barely concealed hope, didn't register the sharp intake of breath, the way time seemed to stop for everyone except them. Maya. Her name, spoken in that voice, the voice she'd heard in her dreams every night for 2 months, made her look up sharply, and there he was. Alexander stood 10 feet away, and he looked different, thinner maybe, or just worn down in ways that had nothing to do with physical weight. His hair was longer, slightly unkempt, and he wore jeans and a simple grey t-shirt instead of his usual polished attire. But his eyes, those storm-colored eyes, were exactly as she remembered, and when they met hers, the connection sparked just like it had that first night in the hotel lobby. "Alexander," Maya breathed, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear anything else. He crossed the cafe in 4 long strides and stopped at her table, his hands clenched at his sides, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "You're here," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "You're really here." "I'm here," Maya confirmed, standing slowly, needing to be at eye level with him. "What are you? How did you find me?" A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "I've been coming here every Saturday since you texted. All 4 Saturdays. I hoped that eventually you'd show up. You always loved small cafes with good coffee, and this one is close to where you're living now." "You know where I'm living?" Maya asked, though she wasn't angry, just surprised. "I know you're in the Riverside neighborhood. I know you got a job at Coastal Adventures Tourism. I know you're taking online classes." Alexander's expression was almost sheepish. "I didn't hire a private investigator or anything creepy. I asked around, called in a few favors. I needed to know you were okay, even if you weren't ready to see me yet." Maya should have been upset by the invasion of privacy, but instead she felt touched, warmed by the evidence of his concern. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Better than okay, actually. I'm good, Alexander, really good." "I can see that." His eyes roamed her face, cataloguing changes. God, Maya, you look radiant, like you're lit from the inside." "I feel that way," she admitted. "I went home and I fell apart, but then I put myself back together. Differently this time. Stronger. And I came back because I wanted to, not because I needed to. That distinction, it matters. It matters," Alexander agreed. Can I sit? Or is this too much too soon? I don't want to pressure you or—" "Sit," Maya interrupted, smiling. "Please sit." He sat across from her, and the small cafe table suddenly felt intimate, charged with 2 months of separation and longing. Maya noticed the way his hands shook slightly, the way he couldn't quite stop looking at her, like he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. "Tell me everything," Alexander said. "Tell me about Texas, about your grandmother, about these classes you're taking. I want to know all of it." So Maya told him about Diane's tough love and her father's letter, about crying under star-filled skies and shelling peas on the porch, about the slow, painful process of remembering who she was before fear and insecurity took over, about coming back to Miami and building a life that was completely hers, a job she chose, an apartment she furnished, classes she took because they fed her soul rather than just padding a resume. Alexander listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at funny moments, his eyes soft with understanding during the hard parts. And then Maya turned the questions back to him. "What about you? Your texts mentioned changes. Tell me." Alexander leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "I left the Ocean View Grand the day after you did, checked out and never went back. I couldn't. Every inch of that place reminded me of you. I've been staying at a house I bought in Coral Gables. Nothing crazy, just somewhere that felt like it could be a home instead of a hotel." "You bought a house?" Maya asked, surprised. "I bought a lot of things," Alexander said with a self-deprecating smile, "including a lot of therapy sessions. Turns out I had some things to work through too. Control issues, fear of vulnerability, the tendency to use money and power to solve emotional problems." He paused. "Losing you, or rather, watching you choose yourself over me, it broke something open, made me realize I'd been living half a life, convinced that success and wealth were enough. But they weren't. They aren't." "So what did you do?" Maya asked, leaning forward, genuinely curious. "I restructured the company, sold my majority share to my business partner, and used the proceeds to start a foundation, Kane Foundation for Emerging Entrepreneurs. We provide seed funding and mentorship to young people from low-income backgrounds who want to start businesses. Real support, not just money." His eyes lit up as he talked, passion evident in every word. "It's the most fulfilling work I've ever done, Maya. Helping people build something meaningful instead of just accumulating wealth for wealth's sake." "Alexander, that's incredible," Maya said, and meant it completely. "You're changing lives." "I'm trying to." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching, asking permission. Maya slid her hand forward, and his fingers immediately laced with hers, the contact sending electricity up her arm. "But Maya, I have to be honest. These 2 months without you, they've been the longest, hardest months of my life. The work is fulfilling, the therapy is helping, the house is beautiful, but none of it means anything without you. I wake up every morning reaching for you before I remember you're not there. I see something interesting, and my first thought is, I can't wait to tell Maya. You're not just part of my life, you've become essential to it. And I know that might sound codependent or unhealthy, but..." "It's not," Maya interrupted gently, "because I feel the same way. I built this whole independent life, proved to myself that I can stand alone, and I can. But Alexander, I don't want to. I want to stand beside you, not behind you, not in your shadow, but beside you as an equal partner, building something beautiful together." Alexander's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. "I love you, Maya Peterson. I loved you the first night you looked at me like I was just a person instead of a bank account. I loved you when you challenged me about living in the now. I loved you when you were brave enough to walk away. And I love you now, sitting in this cafe, glowing with confidence and self-knowledge. I will love you every version of yourself you become for the rest of my life if you'll let me." "I love you too," Maya said, tears streaming down her own face now. "I love your kindness and your growth. I love that you're using your privilege to help others instead of just accumulating more." I love that you waited for me, that you respected my need for space. I love you, Alexander Kane, and I choose you. Every day, I choose you. Then marry me, Alexander said, and Maya's breath caught. I know it's fast. I know we still have things to work through, but Maya, I don't want to waste another day pretending I'm not completely certain about this, about us. Marry me. Be my partner in everything, in life, in love, in building something meaningful together. Are you seriously proposing to me in a cafe? Maya asked, laughing through tears, without even a ring. Actually, Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, Maya gasped. The ring was stunning. A simple, elegant design with an oval-cut diamond that caught the light and fractured it into rainbows. I've been carrying this for 3 weeks, just in case, just hoping that when I finally found you, you'd be ready to say yes. Maya stared at the ring, then at Alexander, and felt certainty settle in her bones. This wasn't rushing, this wasn't fear or desperation. This was two people who'd done the work, faced their demons, grown separately so they could come together stronger. Yes, she said, her voice steady and sure. Yes, I'll marry you. 1,000 times yes. Alexander's face broke into the most beautiful smile Maya had ever seen, and he slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled with joy. Then he stood, pulled her up and into his arms, and kissed her right there in the middle of the cafe, while strangers applauded and someone whistled, and the barista called out, "Congrats!" When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. "I promise you," he whispered, "I will spend every day for the rest of our lives making sure you know how extraordinary you are, that you never feel invisible or small or less than. You've taught me what real success looks like. It's not money in a bank account, it's waking up next to someone who makes you want to be better. It's choosing love even when it's scary. It's building a life that matters." "We'll build it together," Maya said, and it was both promise and truth. Equal partners, two whole people choosing each other daily. "Deal," Alexander agreed, and kissed her again, softer this time, sweeter, full of promise and possibility. They stayed in that cafe for hours, talking about everything, wedding plans, where they'd live, how they'd blend their lives without losing their individual identities. They talked about dreams and fears, boundaries and compromises, the messy, beautiful reality of loving someone while staying true to yourself. As the sun set and the cafe began to close, they walked hand in hand along the Miami beach, barefoot in the sand, just like they'd been in Coastal Bay months ago. The ocean rolled endlessly beside them, constant and changing, exactly like the love they'd fought for, and finally, miraculously, claimed. "Thank you," Alexander said suddenly, stopping to face her, the sunset painting everything gold. "For what?" "For being brave enough to leave, for loving yourself enough to grow, for coming back to me not because you needed to, but because you chose to." He cupped her face gently. "You saved us, Maya, by saving yourself first." Maya kissed him, tasting salt air and happiness, and knew with absolute certainty that this choice, this love, this partnership was the best decision she'd ever made. They'd been tested by judgment and fear, separated by distance and doubt, broken down and rebuilt stronger. And now, finally, they were ready to build something lasting, ready to choose each other every single day, ready for whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. 2 weeks after Alexander's proposal, Maya's phone rang at 7 in the morning. She was still in bed, wrapped in Alexander's arms in the house he'd bought in Coral Gables, the house that was slowly becoming theirs, with her books appearing on shelves and her artwork finding places on walls. "Don't answer it," Alexander mumbled sleepily against her neck. "It's too early." But Maya saw the caller ID, Alexander's assistant, Robert, and knew it had to be important. "It's Robert." Alexander groaned and released her, rolling onto his back. "This better be good," Maya answered on speaker. "Good morning, Robert." Good morning, Maya, Alexander. Robert's voice was professionally apologetic. I'm sorry to call so early, but there's a situation. The Economic Leadership Forum just announced their annual awards, and Alexander, you've been named Business Innovator of the Year for the foundation work. Alexander sat up, suddenly alert. What? The ceremony is in 2 weeks. Manhattan, the Plaza Hotel. Black tie, about 500 attendees, CEOs, investors, politicians, media. It's a very big deal. Robert paused. They're expecting you to attend and give an acceptance speech. I can draft talking points if... I'll write my own speech, Alexander interrupted, running a hand through his hair. Thank you, Robert. Send me the details. When he hung up, Maya could see the conflict on his face. Pride at the recognition warring with something that looked like dread. You don't want to go, she observed. I don't want to go alone, Alexander corrected, turning to face her fully. Maya, this is exactly the kind of event I used to hate. Performative networking, superficial conversations, people who only care about what you can do for them. But with the foundation work, it's different. This award means the work is being recognized, that maybe other wealthy people will be inspired to do something similar. It matters, and I want you there with me. I need you there with me. Maya felt her stomach clench with anxiety. Manhattan, the Plaza, 500 of the most powerful people in business. Alexander, Before you say no, he interrupted gently. Remember what we promised each other. Equal partners. That means sharing the hard parts too. And Maya, these people, this world, it's part of my life. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not, but I am asking you to stand beside me while I navigate it. Can you do that? Maya thought about her grandmother's words about courage, about the promise she'd made to herself to choose bravery over comfort. Okay, she said, and saw relief flood Alexander's features. But I have conditions. Anything. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I won't lie about my background or my job or act like I belong to their world. I'll be respectful and polite, but I'll be Maya Peterson from Texas who works in tourism and takes online classes. Take me as I am, or don't take me at all. Alexander kissed her hard and quick and full of pride. I wouldn't want you any other way. And Maya, they should be so lucky to meet you. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Alexander insisted on buying Maya a dress, not to change you, but because I want to spoil my fiancée, and also because I know what these events cost, and I won't let you spend a month's salary on one night. And they compromised on an elegant navy blue gown that was beautiful without being ostentatious, sophisticated without screaming money. Maya practiced walking in heels, studied table etiquette, and researched the other attendees so she wouldn't be completely lost in conversation. But mostly, she reminded herself over and over, you are enough. You belong because he chose you, and you chose him. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. They flew to New York on a Thursday, and Maya pressed her face to the airplane window like a child, watching the Manhattan skyline emerge from the clouds, a forest of steel and glass and impossible ambition. She'd never been to New York, had only seen it in movies and photographs, and the reality was overwhelming in a way that made her both excited and terrified. The Plaza Hotel was everything she'd imagined and more. Gilded ceilings, crystal chandeliers, marble floors polished to mirror shine. Their suite overlooked Central Park, and Maya stood at the window for a long time, trying to reconcile this fairy tale setting with the girl from rural Texas who used to dream big, but never quite this big. You okay? Alexander asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Honestly, I'm terrified, Maya admitted. What if I say something stupid? What if I use the wrong fork or laugh too loud or... Then you'll be human, Alexander interrupted. Maya, half the people at this event are miserable, hiding behind expensive suits and fake smiles. The fact that you're authentically yourself, that you're not trying to perform some role, that makes you more real than anyone else in that room will be. Easy for you to say, Maya muttered. You grew up in this world. And I've hated most of it for exactly that reason, because it's fake. But with you beside me, it doesn't have to be. He turned her to face him. We're a team, remember. If you get uncomfortable, squeeze my hand twice, and we'll find an excuse to step away. If someone says something offensive, I've got your back. And if at any point you want to leave, even if it's in the middle of my acceptance speech, we leave. No questions asked. Maya felt some of the anxiety ease. You'd really leave during your own speech? In a heartbeat, Alexander said seriously. You're more important than any award, Maya. Always. The night of the gala arrived too quickly. Maya stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself in the navy gown. Her hair swept up in an elegant twist, makeup professionally applied by someone Alexander had hired. She looked sophisticated, polished, expensive. But underneath the dress and makeup, she was still just Maya, and she clung to that truth like a lifeline. The ballroom at the plaza was breathtaking. Thousands of candles, massive floral arrangements, tables set with more silverware than any human should need for a single meal. Maya felt Alexander's hand steady at the small of her back as they entered, and she was grateful for the anchor as hundreds of eyes turned to assess them. The whispers started immediately. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language, curious glances, raised eyebrows, the way women in designer gowns leaned toward each other to murmur behind hands heavy with diamonds. She lifted her chin and smiled, channeling every ounce of confidence she'd built over the past months. They made it through cocktail hour without incident, Alexander introducing her to investors and entrepreneurs, Maya holding her own in conversations about business trends and social innovation. She was doing fine, actually starting to relax until they sat down for dinner. The woman across the table was stunning, late 30s, platinum blonde hair, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. Her name was Vanessa Crawford, and she greeted Alexander with familiarity that made Maya's stomach tighten. Alexander Kane, Vanessa purred, her accent cultured and distinctly Upper East Side. It's been too long. I was just telling Richard that you're doing fascinating work with this little foundation of yours. Little? Alexander's voice was cool. We've funded 32 businesses in the past 6 months, creating over 200 jobs. I'd hardly call that little. Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. You know what I mean. It's very noble, very charitable. Though I do miss the old Alexander who was focused on real business instead of playing philanthropist. Her eyes slid to Maya. And who's this? This is Maya Peterson, Alexander said, his hand finding Maya's under the table. My fiancée. Fiancée? Vanessa's smile was sharp. How wonderful. And what do you do, Maya? Maya felt the weight of judgment in the question, the assumption that she did nothing of value. I work in tourism, she said evenly, helping people experience authentic Miami beyond the typical tourist traps. And I'm studying creative writing and literature. How? Quaint, Vanessa said, and the word dripped with condescension. Tourism, that must be so fulfilling. And you're studying, like, online classes? Yes, online classes, Maya replied, refusing to be embarrassed. They allow me to work full-time while pursuing education. It's actually quite efficient. I'm sure it is. Vanessa turned back to Alexander. So tell me, how did you two meet? Through business? Mutual friends? We met at the Ocean View Grand in Miami, Alexander said. Maya worked at the hotel. The table went quiet. Maya watched realization dawn on Vanessa's face. The staff worked at the hotel and saw the exact moment judgment crystallized into cruelty. Oh, Vanessa said, her voice syrupy sweet. How romantic. A modern Cinderella story, though I suppose it helps when Prince Charming is a billionaire. She laughed, and several others at the table joined in uncomfortably. Maya felt heat flood her face, but before she could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the laughter like ice. Vanessa, let me be very clear about something. Maya is the most intelligent, compassionate, courageous person I've ever met. She's built a life from nothing, survived losses you couldn't imagine, and has more integrity in her little finger than most people in this room have in their entire bodies. The fact that she worked in hospitality, worked any job, honestly worked to support herself, is something to admire, not mock. So I'd suggest you reconsider your tone before you say anything else you'll regret. The table fell silent. Vanessa's face flushed, but she recovered quickly. I didn't mean any offense. Yes, you did, Alexander said flatly. You meant exactly the offense you caused. Maya, would you excuse us for a moment? I need some air. They stood together, and Maya felt every eye in the ballroom, tracking their movement as they left. Outside in the hallway, she finally let her composure crack, leaning against the wall and fighting tears. I can't do this, she whispered. Alexander, I can't sit there and smile while people like her tear me apart with polite words and fake concern. That woman looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. I know. Alexander was pacing, his fury barely contained. I know, and I'm sorry. She's everything I hate about that world. Privileged, cruel, completely lacking in empathy or self-awareness. But Maya, listen to me. He stopped pacing and took her hands. She doesn't matter. Her opinion doesn't matter. What matters is us. And whether you believe what I said in there, that you're extraordinary, that any judgment from people like her says everything about them and nothing about you. But that's your world, Maya said, tears spilling over. These are your people, your colleagues, They're not my people, Alexander interrupted fiercely. You're my people. The foundation staff who work their asses off to help others, they're my people. The entrepreneurs we fund who are trying to build something meaningful, they're my people, not these. He gestured angrily toward the ballroom, not these hollow, judgmental socialites who think money makes them better than everyone else. Just then, a drunk executive stumbled into the hallway, saw them and slurred loudly, Hey, Kane! Nice upgrade from the usual debutantes. This one looks like she actually knows how to have fun, if you know what I mean. He winked grotesquely. Alexander moved so fast Maya almost didn't see it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had the man by the collar, pinned against the wall. Say one more word, Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet, and I will personally ensure you never work in this city again. Do you understand me? The man nodded frantically, and Alexander released him with disgust. The executive scurried away, and Alexander turned back to Maya, his expression shifting immediately from rage to concern. That's it, he said. We're done. We're leaving. But your award. I don't care about the award. Alexander was already pulling out his phone. I'm not accepting recognition from an organization that would tolerate this kind of behavior. Robert can pick it up. I'm taking my fiancée back to our hotel, and tomorrow we're flying home. They did exactly that. Walked out of the plaza while Alexander was supposed to be on stage accepting his award, into the New York night that was surprisingly cool for late spring. In their suite, Maya finally broke down completely, all the hurt and humiliation of the evening pouring out in racking sobs. Alexander held her through it, murmuring apologies and promises, his own anger giving way to something that looked like devastation. I'm so sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry I subjected you to that. I thought it would be different, that if they saw us together, saw how much I love you, it would somehow matter. But they're too busy protecting their own prejudices to see what's right in front of them. It's not your fault, Maya said when she could finally speak. But Alexander, I don't know if I can do this. These events, this world, if this is what being with you means, having to constantly prove I'm worthy of basic respect, then we don't do it, Alexander said immediately. Maya, listen to me. That world, the galas, the networking, the performative bullshit, I hate it as much as you do. I've been doing it because it's expected, because that's how business works in certain circles. But you know what? Screw expectations. Screw those circles. We'll build our own world. We'll create a life that works for us, not for some fantasy of what a power couple is supposed to look like. Maya looked up at him through tears. What does that mean? It means we live in Miami if that's where you're happy. It means I do foundation work and you pursue writing and we build something real together. It means when I do have to attend events like this, I go alone or I don't go at all, because I will never again watch someone I love be diminished by people who aren't worthy of shining your shoes. He cupped her face gently. You were right back in that hotel supply closet months ago. In my old world, I was the sun and everything revolved around me. But I don't want that anymore. I want us to be dual suns, creating our own solar system where we both shine equally. Where your dreams matter as much as mine. Where we choose happiness and authenticity over prestige and appearances. You'd really do that? Maya asked. Give up this world? The recognition, the networking, all of it? In a heartbeat, Alexander said. Because none of it means anything if I'm losing you in the process. These past months, building the foundation, working with people who actually want to make a difference, I've been happier than I've ever been. And the only thing that would make it better is doing it with you beside me, not behind me, not in my shadow, but beside me. Equal partners in everything. Maya felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, but clarity. I love you, she said. And I want to build that world with you. But Alexander, I need you to understand. Tonight scared me. It showed me that there will always be people who look at us and see inequality, who judge me for where I come from, and you for loving me despite it. I need to know that you're prepared for that you won't regret choosing me when it costs you opportunities or relationships. There is nothing, Maya, that I could gain from this world that would be worth losing you, Alexander said with absolute conviction. You are my opportunity. You are my most important relationship. Everything else is just noise. They held each other as Manhattan sparkled outside their window, two people who'd been tested by the cruelty of others and had chosen each other anyway. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be Vanessas and drunk executives, always people ready to judge what they didn't understand. But they would face it together, building their own definition of success that had nothing to do with ballrooms and awards and everything to do with love, respect, and choosing each other daily. In the morning, they flew home to Miami, leaving Manhattan and its glittering cruelty behind. And as the city disappeared beneath the clouds, Maya felt not defeat, but liberation. She'd faced Alexander's world and found it wanting. Now they would build something better, something real, something theirs. And that was worth more than all the awards in the world. The week after Manhattan, Maya and Alexander sat on their back porch in Coral Gables, drinking morning coffee and watching hummingbirds fight over the feeder Maya had hung. The silence between them was comfortable, healing, the kind of quiet that came after a storm when you realized you were both still standing. I don't want a big wedding, Maya said suddenly. Alexander looked over at her, curious. No. I don't want 500 people we barely know, photographers documenting every moment, months of planning for one perfect day. I want... She paused, searching for the right words. I want small, intimate, real. The people who actually matter to us, in a place that means something, not a performance for society pages, but a genuine celebration of us choosing each other. Alexander's smile was slow and genuine. That sounds perfect. What did you have in mind? Beach, Maya said immediately. Somewhere in the Keys, maybe. Barefoot in the sand, sunset ceremony, your closest friends and my grandmother. Maybe 20 people total. Vows we write ourselves. Your business partner as best man. My college roommate as maid of honor. Simple food, good music, real laughter, a beginning that actually feels like us, instead of trying to be what we think a billionaire's wedding should look like. I love it, Alexander said, and she could see he meant it completely. When? Maya grinned. How fast can we plan it? They settled on 6 weeks, enough time to arrange logistics, but not so long that they'd overthink it. Alexander handled the venue, finding a private beach house in Key Biscayne with white sand and crystal-clear water. Maya designed simple invitations by hand, each one personal and heartfelt. They kept the guest list deliberately small. Alexander's business partner David and his wife, a few foundation staff members who'd become genuine friends, Maya's grandmother Diane flying in from Texas, and a handful of others who'd been there for them during the hard times. 1 week before the wedding, Maya woke up feeling nauseous. She dismissed it as wedding nerves until it happened 3 mornings in a row, accompanied by exhaustion so profound she could barely keep her eyes open during her shift at the tourism agency. "You need to take a pregnancy test," her co-worker Jennifer said bluntly when Maya mentioned the symptoms. "Like right now. Those are not stressed about wedding symptoms." Maya laughed it off, but the seed was planted. After work, she stopped at a pharmacy, bought 3 different tests and took them in the bathroom of their house while Alexander was in a video conference. All 3 came back positive within seconds. 2 pink lines, a plus sign, the word pregnant in digital letters. Maya sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the tests, her mind completely blank. Pregnant. She was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. In approximately 7 months, give or take, their family of 2 would become 3. Terror and joy warred inside her chest in equal measure. They'd talked about children, someday, eventually, after they were married and settled, but someday had apparently decided to arrive ahead of schedule. That evening, Maya set the table for dinner with extra care, lighting candles and opening the good wine. Well, Alexander's wine. She poured herself sparkling water. When Alexander emerged from his office, looking exhausted from back-to-back calls, she guided him to his seat and placed a small wrapped box beside his plate. "What's this?" he asked, confused but smiling. "It's not my birthday." "Just open it," Maya said, barely able to contain her nervous excitement. Alexander unwrapped the box carefully, pulled out the tissue paper, and stared at the contents. 3 positive pregnancy tests arranged in a row, with a tiny note that read, "In 7 months will be 3. Surprise." His face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, shock, understanding, then absolute joy that lit him up from the inside. We're... He couldn't seem to form complete sentences. "We're having a baby," Maya confirmed, tears already streaming down her face. "I found out today. I'm probably about 6 weeks along, which means she didn't get to finish because Alexander was out of his chair and pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. And she realized he was crying too, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "We're having a baby," he repeated, his voice muffled against her hair. "Maya, we're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Maya asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know this wasn't planned, and we're getting married in a week, and everything is already so much happy." Alexander pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were shining with tears and something that looked like wonder. "Maya, I don't even have words. You're giving me a family, a real family, something I never thought I'd have, something I didn't even know I was missing until you. Yes, I'm happy. I'm terrified and overwhelmed and completely unprepared, but I'm so incredibly happy I could burst." They spent the evening talking about everything. Doctor's appointments, when to tell people how they'd need to adjust their lives and plans. Maya worried aloud about morning sickness during the wedding, about whether her dress would still fit, about being a good mother when she'd lost her own so young. Alexander worried about being like his father, absent, emotionally unavailable, until Maya took his face in her hands and reminded him that the fact he was worried about it meant he already wasn't. "We're going to figure this out together," Maya said firmly. "Just like everything else. We'll make mistakes, we'll have no idea what we're doing half the time, but we'll love this baby with everything we have. That's what matters." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, blue skies, gentle breeze, temperature in the high 70s. Maya got ready in the beach house with her grandmother and Jennifer, wearing a simple ivory dress that flowed in the breeze and hid her still flat stomach. Diane had brought a crown of wildflowers from Texas, and when she placed it on Maya's head, both of them cried. "Your parents would be so proud," Diane whispered, adjusting the flowers. "You found someone who sees you, really sees you. That's rare and precious." "Thank you," Maya said, hugging her grandmother fiercely. "Thank you for everything, for raising me, for being honest with me, for teaching me that love is worth fighting for." "That's what family does," Diane said simply. The ceremony took place at sunset, with about 20 people gathered on the white sand. Alexander stood at a simple arch, decorated with local flowers, wearing linen pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed and genuinely happy than Maya had ever seen him. When she walked toward him, barefoot, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, her grandmother beside her, his eyes filled with tears. The officiant was a friend of Alexander's who kept the ceremony short and meaningful. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Maya's turn to speak, she looked at Alexander and felt her heart overflow. "Alexander," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion, "you found me when I was hiding, invisible in a world of marble and luxury. You saw me when I didn't think I was worth seeing. You challenged me to be braver, to want more, to believe I deserved love and happiness and big dreams. You let me go when I needed to find myself, and you welcomed me back when I was ready to choose us. Today, I'm choosing you, not because I need you, but because I love you, because you make me want to be the best version of myself, because together we're building something real and meaningful and completely ours. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner. I promise to keep choosing you every single day. And I promise to build our family." She placed her hand on her still flat stomach and watched his eyes widen with renewed joy. "With love, honesty, and courage. I love you, Alexander Kane, today, tomorrow, forever." Alexander's vows were equally emotional, his voice breaking several times as he promised to honor her strength, protect her dreams, and create a life where they both could shine. When he mentioned becoming a father, his voice cracked completely, and several guests wiped away tears. They exchanged simple gold bands. No diamonds, no ostentation, just solid circles representing commitment and eternity. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," Alexander pulled Maya close and kissed her like they were the only two people on earth, while their small audience cheered and the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The reception was casual and perfect. Tables on the sand, string lights overhead, a playlist of their favorite songs instead of a live band. Diane had made her famous chocolate cake. 3 tiers of rich, dense perfection that had been Maya's favorite since childhood. They ate fresh seafood and drank champagne, sparkling cider for Maya, and everyone shared stories and laughter until the stars came out. Later, dancing barefoot in the sand to an old country song, Alexander leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for marrying me. Thank you for this life. Thank you for everything." "Thank you for finding me," Maya whispered back. "Thank you for not giving up." 7 months later, in a Miami hospital room at 3:42 a.m., Mariana Kane was born, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with her father's dark hair and her mother's expressive brown eyes, and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. Alexander cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, then held his daughter for the first time and cried openly. "She's perfect," he kept saying, staring at the tiny face with absolute wonder. Maya, she's absolutely perfect. Maya, exhausted and radiant, watched her husband hold their daughter and felt something complete inside her chest. This was family. This was home. This was everything she'd been too afraid to want when she first arrived in Miami, with nothing but grief and one taped-together suitcase. The years that followed were not without challenges. Sleepless nights with a colicky baby, arguments about parenting styles and work-life balance, the ongoing struggle to maintain individual identities while being partners and parents. But they faced it all together, keeping their promise to choose each other daily, to communicate honestly, to build their life intentionally, rather than letting it happen to them. Alexander restructured his work so he could be present, truly present, for Mariana's childhood. He coached her soccer team, attended every school play, taught her to read using the same Garcia Marquez book he'd given Maya. The foundation thrived, expanding to 3 cities and helping hundreds of young entrepreneurs build meaningful businesses. Maya finished her degree, then started writing. First articles about travel and authentic experiences, then a memoir about loss and love and finding yourself in unexpected places. It was published to modest success, but the real victory was in writing it, in claiming that dream she'd been too afraid to pursue for so long. Mariana grew into a bright, curious child, with her mother's empathy and her father's determination. At age 10, she announced she wanted to start a charity that collected books for kids whose families couldn't afford them. Alexander and Maya helped her create a non-profit, teaching her that privilege came with responsibility, that having resources meant sharing them with others. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Alexander and Maya returned to Key Biscayne, to the same beach where they'd gotten married. They walked barefoot in the sand, holding hands, watching the sunset paint the sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya asked. "Giving up that other life, the galas, the prestige, the world where you were the most important person in every room?" Alexander stopped walking and pulled her close. "Not for a single second." That life was hollow, Maya. Beautiful on the surface, but empty underneath. This, he gestured around them, encompassing not just the beach, but their entire life. This is real. This matters. Waking up next to you every morning, watching Mariana grow into an incredible human, doing work that actually helps people, that's success. That's what I was missing for 28 years before I walked into a hotel lobby and saw a woman behind a desk who changed everything. "I love you," Maya said, the words still carrying the same weight they had that first time she'd said them. "Thank you for choosing me, for keep choosing me." "Always," Alexander promised, and kissed her as the sun set over the ocean, painting their world in gold. That night, back in their hotel room, they looked through old photos, Maya's first day at the Ocean View Grand, Alexander's first check-in, candid shots from their early dates, wedding pictures that captured joy and bare feet and genuine laughter. They had a photo from the night they'd met, captured by hotel security cameras, showing Alexander staring at Maya at the front desk with an expression of stunned recognition. "We should show this to Mariana," Maya said. "Tell her the whole story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one, the fear and doubt, the mistakes and separations, all of it." "Why?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious. "Because I want her to know that real love isn't a fairy tale. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you have to walk away to find your way back. I want her to know that loving someone means choosing them every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Maya smiled. "And I want her to know that her mom was once a scared girl from Texas who thought she didn't deserve big dreams, but who was brave enough to try anyway. Because maybe someday, when she's scared, she'll remember that and be brave too." Alexander pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, looking at the photographs of their journey. From that first electric connection in a hotel lobby to building a family and life that exceeded anything either of them had imagined. They'd been tested by judgment and separation, challenged by different worlds and cruel strangers. They'd faced their own fears and insecurities, learned to communicate and compromise, fought to maintain their individual identities while building something together. And in the end, they'd created something beautiful, not despite the challenges, but because of them. Because love wasn't about finding someone who completed you, but about two whole people choosing to build something greater than either could create alone. As Maya fell asleep that night, wrapped in Alexander's arms in their Key Biscayne hotel room, she thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, afraid, convinced she didn't deserve more than scraps. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong, confident, brave enough to claim her dreams and fight for her happiness. The journey from there to here had been painful and transformative, but she wouldn't change a single step, because every moment, the heartbreak and the healing, the separation and the reunion, the fear and the courage, had brought her to this. A life filled with love and purpose, a family she'd built with intention and care, a partnership that honored both people equally. This was success. This was happiness. This was home. And it was more than enough. It was everything. 10 years after that first electric glance across a hotel lobby, Maya and Alexander still chose each other every morning. They'd learned that love wasn't a destination, but a daily decision. To see each other fully, to honor individual dreams while building shared ones, to be brave enough to stay even when fear whispered to run. Their daughter Mariana carried their legacy forward, proof that two people from different worlds could create something beautiful when they refused to let judgment define them. Because in the end, Maya realized something profound. She hadn't needed to choose between love and herself. She'd needed to love herself enough to demand both. And that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what allows us to keep bringing stories that speak to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of choosing love and yourself every single day.